Go ahead.
All right, is everybody ready?
Yes, sir.
Chuck, are you ready? All right, welcome to our Thursday, March 2nd, Roanoke County School Board work session. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Linden?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tony is absent. Mr. Ray?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, ma'am. Moving on to 2.01, William Byrd High School additional HVAC renovation, not included in the original scope of work. Mr. Todd Kegels.
Good evening, everybody.
So Avis Construction had come to us and identified some units at William Byrd High School, some air conditioning units at William Byrd High School that do not function as designed for various reasons. And we had discussed this just a little bit in the past. They had given us a estimate to replace those units at about $1.5 million. Our maintenance team evaluated their recommendations and believes that by replacing just the control systems and then doing some repairs as detailed in the document there, that the cost would be about $350,000 for us to get the system to work as it's designed to work. That would put everything in the building 100% when they're done with the renovations. Now that money is not included in the renovation, and so I'm bringing that information to you all to determine whether or not you want to fund that in some way.
How much is left in the contingency fund?
Not enough to cover that. After the, there's about $298,000 in there now, roughly. After the request tonight for the additional furniture and the other things that we'll discuss here in just a second, there'll be about $168,000 remaining.
And let's be clear, this is not a contingency item. This is a item that should have been addressed, that should have been a part of the renovation.
Yeah, the mechanical system, just like happened at Cave Spring, they didn't completely renovate the mechanical system there, and then we ended up spending a bunch of money this summer to go back and replace a bunch of compressors and things like that there. So those things were, they used the term value engineered. They were left in place knowing that they, had some serviceable life left. But to get them to work correctly and for the system to work 100% when the renovation is finished, they'll have to have this additional work.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was just gonna mention that I think we had a situation at Cave Spring with the HVAC that we had to go back and
We did.
why these things are not included or why. Maybe they didn't know it, but then they say, oh, well, they'll do it later. Well, it's an expense, whether it's pay me now, pay me later, so.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they looked at them when we did the renovation, when we started this process, but said they felt like they would be sufficient.
Yeah, they had some life left at the time. I believe, keep in mind, I wasn't privy to all those conversations. I was well prior to me coming into this role. But my understanding is that those were evaluated, and because they had some service life left, they were, to be left in place. Now a couple of them have stopped working in the meantime. But for reasons that our HVAC guys believe are repairable.
I'm okay with it as long as you think, this is the fix. I just don't want to spend this money and then we come back and say, wait a minute, we need to replace these. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so these recommendations were made by our lead HVAC technician and our supervisor of maintenance, and both of those gentlemen know all the HVAC systems in the county very well, and have, probably 60 years of experience between the two of them. And so I trust when they say that if you replace the control system and make these repairs, that they have a significant service life remaining and that they'll work correctly. The contractor, of course, would like to just put all new equipment in there.
Sure.
But that's like, going to a shop and they tell you buy a new car instead of fixing your current car. So,
Yeah.
And there's profit in that, obviously, for them as well. So we believe that, for $350,000, those could be fixed and you'd be 100% coming into the renovation.
Have you spoke to Susan about where it comes from, yeah. And the
We did
funds.
have a brief conversation, and it would seem to make sense that that money would come from major capital where the original project came from, correct, Susan?
Yeah, you could take it out of major capital. There's just under $800,000 in there.
Okay. Do we have a choice? I mean,
That's what I was getting ready to say. I don't think there's much of a choice, so.
Yeah, we fix it, or we gotta, you can't even nurse it on to any other time, so it's, I mean, you do it now, and it's gonna happen anyway, you gotta do it.
While the construction's still going.
That's right.
It's obviously a true use for contingency funds, and I get 182,000, is that what we're looking at?
That's
But
what
that
will be
could-
left roughly after we, 168 is what will be left after this evening.
Right, but if we need to get to 350, then we're gonna
Oh,
have to.
right. You need additional money. Now, keep in mind, they're not done. And we became aware today that they've located some asbestos on some pipes in the old section that they're currently renovating, and there's gonna be some remediation costs there. We don't know what those are gonna be yet. But, the contingency is not gonna cover those, so.
All right. We're going to have to move forward with that.
when do you need to have this approved?
Well,
We got time.
it's gonna get warm here soon, so we'd like to go ahead and, if you're gonna fund that, then we'd like to go ahead and get started as soon as possible.
Mr. Chairman, should we go ahead and fund it?
That was going to be my question. Is that something that we can do in the work session?
Oh, we don't need, we can wait,
Can we wait till the
the 2
meeting?
weeks isn't gonna
Oh.
make any difference between now and then, so, we can put it on for consent next time.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. 2.02, William Byrd High School renovation contingency request.
Yeah, so I've detailed all the items there. We're making a recommendation that $130,000, $224 be appropriated from the contingency to pay for all the individual items that are listed there. If you look at the furniture proposal, it's quite extensive, so won't go into each individual item. So the first line on board docs, the 99,000, that is the detailed document that's attached there, and then there's a request for 47 filing cabinets, some shelving, some concrete sealer, cork boards that weren't originally included, and then there's some plumbing things that need to be done, a backflow preventer that failed the inspection when Avis went to do that, and some shutoff valves there. So the total request is $130,224 of the existing $298 in the contingency fund.
All right. Anybody have anything on that?
I'm good with that.
All necessary items, I guess.
I have not been evaluating those myself. My understanding is if the school says they, need, there's trophy cases in there and all sorts of things. So if they've said that they need it, then, we've made the request to come out of the contingency. I don't make that decision whether or not they're.
It's nothing I
They're
know
appropriate
about or
use.
nothing I've asked for, so I'm assuming it's all needed.
Yeah, and there's nothing in there that's like, an item we don't have at another school or, I don't know, a hot tub or anything like that. It's all just furniture.
I think there is one of
and
those at Cleaver, but not
cabinets.
at,
Who looks over this kind of thing anyway? to kind of double check and make sure that everything is, well, like if an item is not way more expensive than what we need versus what we want. Does anybody overlook
vets
this?
the list?
Yeah, who vets the list?
Well, I go through it, and the furniture's all under contract. So all the furniture for the William Byrd High renovation, we have a contract with the company for that. But all of the other stuff that, we are kind of doing.
I think what your
like the
husband's
shelving.
asking is, because it sounds like you actually have looked at the list.
Oh, yeah.
I think what he's asking is, was there anything, in your opinion, that stood out saying, that's kind of questionable? Because it sounds like you are looking at the list.
I do look at the list.
Okay, no eyesores like $2,000 chairs or something, something like that?
No, not that I know of. And like I said, all those are contracted prices
Okay.
with that. And what's happened here is that some of the rooms, for instance, like they have a special ed work area. Well, there was no furniture included for those areas, no desks, no chairs, nothing. So some of that stuff was just missed, it appears, in the original furniture budget. So, like not having cork boards on the walls in the classroom where you can, post stuff, that just wasn't included in the original scope. But that is the purpose of having the contingency there, is to get all those little items that get missed, so.
Okay.
And I will say, I mean, the construction progress meetings are on Wednesdays at 2:00 every other week. I've been to, quite a few of those. I know you have. So I feel like we are keeping a good pulse on things, and I can vouch for just the conversations and decisions that are made during those meetings. I mean, everybody's being very reasonable. I've never heard anybody say, ask for something that I question or think, oh my gosh, we don't really need that. I think it's going to be a really nice product. I think they're going to be really proud of it. But I think it's be very reasonable and put the school on par with, their other high schools. I feel like I can vouch for that.
Okay.
I can say this, some of our furniture, and I don't know if this is part of it or if this was already replaced, but some of the furniture of the desks that were there 50 years ago, some of the, like, chair desk, some of our classrooms are still furnished with that type of chair desk. And I don't know if that's part of it or if we're getting.
Well, it won't be when we're done.
Good. I mean, I've not seen that in any other school. I don't know if any other school in the county, not even.
Still has those.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, and a bunch of that stuff's already here, down in the warehouse. They just, as they go through and finish renovating the different sections, all that stuff will be moved in. So
Right.
there won't be any of that old stuff left.
Good enough.
All right. Item 2.03, county easement request at Hidden Valley High School for stream restoration project.
I think Chuck's going to bring up a map for us. Roanoke County is requesting an easement along the stream on the side of that we own. They're doing stream restoration. They're cleaning up the banks. That doesn't have any impact on the school whatsoever. We went out there today to look at it just to make sure, that we knew what we were asking for and what we were approving. It's there's a bus lot up there. You come down the slope, and there's a creek, and the county's applying for a grant to go in and clean all of that up. The areas that they already have cleaned up are much nicer than this area. So we would recommend approving their easement request. It's just to go in there and do stream restoration with no impact to the school.
Mr. Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this include riprap or anything like that?
No, not, they're gonna go in and clean up anything that's fallen into the creek. There's, dirt that's washed in, like off the banks. There's trees that have fallen down in there. And then what they did on the other side that they've already cleaned up, there's a floodplain just right on the edges of the banks, and they go through and they clean up all the brush and debris that are in those areas, but they're not talking about doing riprap or anything like that.
Mike, they did a little bit of that. I assume this is the same work I asked about in Benton. They're behind the Gish Mill. Is that the same? I think it's probably the same type of project, and it really did turn out nice. They went in and cleaned the bank back. Some kind of, I think, flood mitigation, so if you get so much water, it has a bigger capacity to handle it. But they cleaned up all the riffraff, all the trees that were knocked over and everything that was down in those areas. And so it made it much wider, much nicer.
And that does, so it can handle, more volume. Plus, I'm assuming that goes through the Army Corps of Engineers,
I don't know, the county's doing that. That's, not something we're handling.
because they're pretty stringent on what you do, what you can do in the creek, so I assume they got all those regulations done. So,
Will this be a temporary easement or a permanent easement?
Harley? It's permanent. Permanent easement, okay.
Permanent.
Harley does all of our stormwater stuff, so,
and it's 2.1 acres.
for the easement, is that the total? No.
So,
Approximate or
2.14.
Right in
I
that area.
know it's in the document.
It's just along the stream there.
And at one point, it doesn't get into the road or that one that comes pretty close to it?
Are you talking about on Cantor Drive?
Yeah.
Well, that's not the side that we own, so we're just looking, we're only looking at the part of it that we
Oh,
own.
you're looking on the opposite, okay. Okay.
And so we'd recommend that that be on consent agenda for the next meeting.
Any problems? All right. 2.04 surplus request.
Yes, sir. All the items are listed there. That's mostly food service stuff. That's stuff that's either no longer serviceable or no longer has a useful purpose for us. And we'd request that that be moved to consent item for the next meeting.
Any questions?
I can't help, and I don't, not to belabor this, but I did see the list, and I was wondering what a buffalo chopper was. I don't know if y'all saw
I wondered that too, but
Guillotine type?
what is a buffalo chopper?
that. We'll move on, but I just couldn't help but wondering what that was.
Just get the buffalo out of the way.
Not any of
Keep
that?
Tim away from it.
All right, seems like that's good. 2.05 playground mulch.
So I'm sure you guys realize that you approved money to go in and renovate the playgrounds. And as we've completed some of those projects, some of them come in under budget. The ones that come in under budget, we would request that the money that is left be reappropriated to use for playground mulch. When we renovate the playgrounds, we automatically mulch those. But of course, that doesn't include every playground around the county. And our estimates range from about $97,000 down to about 85 or so, depending on which ones need to be done and when as we go through the cycle. And there's not money budgeted for that anywhere. And in talking to Ms. Peterson, this is an ongoing issue in terms of how we pay for that. So our recommendation would be that anything that's left that you've already approved to be used for playgrounds be reappropriated when we return that money to minor capital, that we reappropriate it to use for playground mulch. There won't be $97,000 worth, but there'll be enough to offset some of that cost.
Is this wood mulch?
Yes, sir. It's a certified playground mulch. They have to certify it for, the lack of chemicals and that it has the right properties to be used on the playgrounds.
And we get that locally? Local?
Yeah, well, I was just looking at Harley. Harley's our playground guy.
Oh.
And we do.
We
have
do try to
local
get it
contracts.
locally if we get it. One of the challenges too that we have is having the staff to install it ourselves. So we try to use local businesses that can install that for us as well as purchase it locally.
That's good. Keep the money here. Thank you.
Yeah, and the areas, the amount is so large because the area is so large. Mr. Hudson and I were talking right before the meeting, just one playground can typically have over 100 cubic feet of mulch that has to be spread.
Thank you, Mr. Kegels. 2.06 mobile classroom installation costs.
We have finally finished all of the trailers and all the mobile classrooms and have all of the bills in now, and I actually need to revise that number. We were recommending that $80,000 be appropriated for minor capital to cover the installation costs. It's about $84,000 in actual dollars. We received a couple more bills for some fire alarm stuff in between the publishing of board docs and today's meeting. So we would recommend that $84,000 be appropriated for minor capital to cover the installation cost of the trailer. You might be interested, the trailers are actually pretty expensive to install. When you average it out, it costs, of course, you have new ones and you have ones that were replaced, so there's a different cost there. But when you average it out, it costs about $45,000 to, that's install cost, not for the trailer, but that's wiring, data wiring, bringing electricity to them, putting in sidewalks, to access the trailers, that sort of thing. So we're recommending that we appropriate that money to pay the installation costs.
It also takes about a year to install, right?
Sometimes. Some were much shorter, it just depends.
All right. Anybody have any issues with that?
If you have questions about like how that money was spent, that document that's available in board docs gives a detailed list of every purchase that was made for the trailer projects.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kegels. 2.07 review of selected administrative regulations and policies. This is Stephanie Hogan.
Sure.
Just for clarification, are 2.03 through 2.06 all going to be on consent agenda?
Yes, sir. With your permissions, we'd like to do.
The short one.
David doesn't need one.
Oh, sorry. There's more of you in there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members and Dr. Nicely. What I have for you today is just some minor changes to some administrative regs that doesn't require any board action. I believe that you have seen some of this information, and I just wanted to bring it to you to see if you had any questions today. So I'll give you a minute just to look at it and see if you have any questions. Okay. All right, so if there are no questions, that's all for me today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hogan. 2.08, updated 2023-2024 school calendar and new 2024-2025 school calendar. Dr. Rhonda Stegall.
While Dr. Seagal's getting set up, she has two items related to our school calendar. One is she's going to talk about, like we do each year, some adjustments she's recommending for next year's school calendar. We always look at these 2 years out, just let parents plan ahead and that kind of thing. So she'll be going over next year's calendars as well as after that as information. In board docs, I'm not sure how this is translated well, but 2.09, which is also bringing, we put that in for requesting action, if you saw that, even though it's not listed as an action item. I just wanted to clarify that we did put it in there with that intention. So when she gets to that, she'll be asking for your action today on that one.
All right, thank you.
All right, so just to talk a little bit about how we develop calendars, just some basic guidelines that we have to follow is we have to meet a minimum. The minimum is 180 days or 990 teaching hours. So that's how we begin the calendar. We also have to consider graduation dates. We book those well in advance at the Civic Center. And a lot of people always ask, how come we don't take the Friday before Labor Day? In 2011 and 12, we were waived from that, and that is available on the VDOE website. The recent changes we've made, we put out a survey in 2020 and received a whole lot of information, over 4,000 responses from parents and staff. And so we built those calendars around that information. And so the things that we added in the current calendar that we have, we added 6 days to the start of the school year. We normally start with 5 work days, but our teachers needed more time to do the work at the beginning of the school year, so we added a 6th day. We also added 4 3-hour early dismissals into the schedule. The reason we did that is because of a need to have more professional development time for our teachers. And if we did that across the division, 2-hour early dismissals did not allow them to go across the county and then have good PD. So we put those into the calendar and then also we decided that spring break would be the last full week of March, and that would remain consistent regardless of where Easter would fall. And then the last thing we always do is consider 5 bank days, and we always build those into the calendar. So if you take a look at the 23-24 calendar that you have in front of you, here are some changes. Now, you have already adopted this calendar, but here are some changes that we need to make to this calendar. First of all, on the first one, we moved to early dismissal day. That was just simply balancing out the calendar. We just moved it. We went from 1 week and just balanced it out. The second one is the biggest one. So we had some conversation around parent-teacher conference day, and this past year we had to add a work day in for that parent-teacher conference day. And the more we considered it, we decided to put that work day back in. So what we will have, again, is similar to what we have this year. We will have a November 1st will be our parent-teacher conference day, and then the election day will then turn into a work day for our staff. So that is one big change to that calendar. Another thing you'll see in that calendar that's a little unusual is March 5th. That is the date for presidential primary. We are closed that day because of the voting in our schools. And then only thing that happened is we moved a 3-hour early dismissal that was in March. We moved that to April, and you can see on April's calendar there were no time for teacher planning, so we decided to move that one to April to give them a little bit of a break and some time to plan. So a couple other things that we have made changes with for this calendar is that the HR completed some employee stay interviews. So what they were was interviews with employees who, not leaving, but who were staying with us, and they were across the level of experiences. And so they surveyed them and had feedback on what is it that you like about our school division, and what is it that you think we need to consider. So overwhelmingly, the theme from that survey was that they need more time for planning and to collaborate with those in their building. So taking that into consideration, we took that to the calendar. And so we added that November 7th that I just talked about. We added that as a work day. That's an additional work day for our teachers. Then we also went in and we gave them 4 professional 3-hour early dismissals. We have decided to take 2 of those and turn those into planning time for teachers, and also no meetings so that they cannot be interrupted. So we were giving them those 2 times where they will have, after the early dismissal, they will have that time for planning only. And then we also have decided that on the work days before the grading period, there are 3 of those days, we've decided to say that no meetings can interfere with that planning time. So we're really listening to the feedback from our teachers and tried to build that into our calendar to support them. So the 24-25 calendar very much mimics the calendar that we just reviewed. However, the way the calendars fall, we're getting really tight, and we're having trouble getting all the days in that we need. So in this calendar, the only difference is we're starting a little bit later in August, and we're actually having to go after Memorial Day. We typically try to, in the last couple calendars, we have been out before Memorial Day. This 24-25 calendar, we're going to have to push past Memorial Day, but here's how it helps us. In the original calendar that we put up, we were going to have to start school on a Friday. That was going to be our first student day, which was really not a good plan. And then we were also going to have a teacher work day on a Saturday because we just ran out of days. So by moving the calendar back 3 days and going in past Memorial Day, it balances the calendar out beautifully, and then it allows us to move off those difficult schedules that we had previously. We were able to move our graduations. We had our graduations locked in. The Civic Center was able to move them to that following week in May, so those have been confirmed for us. Another thing that's different on that calendar is Easter does not fall within the spring break, so we had to build in the Friday before Easter because that's the day we consider as the holiday. So that's the 24-25 calendar.
Just like Dr. Stegall said, I just want to point out, the whole Memorial Day thing, it just so happens we're in a cycle where Memorial Day, instead of falling typically on the 30th or 31st of May, it's fallen, about a week earlier. So it actually helps us to avoid that earlier start, like on August 1st. So it's actually a pretty good plan. I was glad we were able to work that out at the Civic Center for graduation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the one that we were going to talk about, ask for action, is a proposal for your consideration for this current calendar. So now we're jumping back to this current 22-23 calendar, asking that if schools could be closed on April 10th following the holiday. So the staff and students currently, the school's closed on the Friday before the 7th, and we're asking for you to consider closing on the 10th.
This includes all staff, correct?
It does, all staff.
Even 12-month staff?
Yes.
Okay.
We thought you would attach it to a holiday weekend. I mean, it kind of lends itself to be able to do that. So, of course, we've not had any snow days so far, this year. So not that we won't get any, but we're in really good shape. Don't want to set a precedent there because really we value our instructional time, but we thought that would be a nice thing for the staff as well as families, just to be able to extend that holiday weekend anyway. A lot of people travel that weekend.
All right. And we want to make this an action item today because we need to give families time to...
Yes, sir. And I apologize, in board docs, for some reason, for a for a work session, one of the drop-down menus is not to say action item, but I did put that wording in there just to make it clear that we would be asking for action today. I didn't want to surprise you.
Okay. All right, well, I'll make that motion that we accept that in the calendar.
Second.
Discussion. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Linden?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Ray?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And I do have a question before we finish this, not the vote, but, so how many hours do we attribute to each day? So we've got 180 days.
So we have 180 days. You mean how many hours do we get each day? I have that calculated into actual minutes because we do it by minutes. Because we have to take out recess, exchange of class, all of that time, lunchtime has to come out. And then it's somewhere around 360 some minutes a day. And then for elementary, and then you have to calculate that.
So that'd be roughly 6 hours?
We're, for what? For a day?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
yes.
180 days at 6 hours. And so when I did it to get to the 990, it was 5.5 hours. So we add in the 5 extra days for snow days, right?
Well,
And I guess those half hours are where it just,
yeah, what it is, the elementary schedule is always what it drives it because it's shorter, than the secondary. So, the state sets up a bare minimum of what you have to do, because if you don't meet the minimum, then you have to go and request a waiver that, hey, you didn't even meet the minimum. So that 990 hours is designed to be, the minimum that you should be given instruction. And of course, in Roanoke County, we try to go beyond the minimum.
no, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Yep. I was just curious how that worked. Okay.
And plus for snow days, I just went back and looked at 21-22 calendar. We only had 4 days remaining because of inclement weather, and that was not a heavy weather day. But if we get 10 or 12 inclement weather days, which we've had in our past, then we would use up all of those bank days. So that's the reason they're in there, because of our heavier winter.
So I guess
years.
my point is, most years, not like this year, we use most of those bank days, right?
We
So
do.
we do the minimal amount of hours and days.
Oh,
for
we
the-
have to, right?
Right, no, I get that. I'm good with that. My only thing here is we're asking for 1 day with 5 bank days. So I just want to make people realize this is not a big deal. It's not a big stretch. It's 1 day where we had 5 banked. I got a call today asking why we don't get all 5, and this wasn't from a teacher, this was from a parent about, and David may have gotten this call also because they were going to call you next. Yeah. So, and they're in the real estate field, just to let you know. So,
Go ahead and tell us who it is.
yeah, well, so anyway, we're giving a day back, which is, I think it's a great thing and something we should do. But, there are years where we do the minimal. And so to give 1 day, we're still getting 4 days in a year that probably needs remediation. I wish we were targeting those days maybe and giving some of that back and targeting those days to remediation for those kids that needed it the most.
We really believe it. I know all of you have shared this opinion, being in person, letting the teachers do their thing, how they do their instruction is really the best in that environment. I think we'd probably get a mixed results if we just said, hey, we're going to close. But, those of you who need the extra remediation, which may be the unmotivated ones to begin with, we want you to come in. So I think this is actually could probably, get the most bang for our buck, like your point, because we do have some ground to keep catching up with, on instruction. So
Thank you.
we appreciate y'all giving this, though.
Thank you.
2.10, review of behavior, education, and disciplinary responses. Dr. Rhonda Segal and Dr. Jessica McClung.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. Dr. Stegall and I are going to tag team on a presentation tonight because we have 2 distinct ways we deal with behavior in Roanoke County. One is some proactive things to set up the environment to prevent behaviors from happening. And the other is how we respond to serious behaviors. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we do with school climate and culture. And this goes hand in hand with a lot of the PBIS efforts that you hear about. And I want to make sure there's no misunderstanding. Some people think that PBIS is a way to eliminate consequences. That's not the case at all. It's a way to set up the environment to prevent behaviors. There's a separate process that Dr. Stegall is going to share with you about what do we do when it does happen, if that makes sense. So what we try to do is make sure we have positive school climates, that we have clear and consistent expectations for our kids, and that we all understand safety is the number one priority, whether it's real or perceived threats. We take that very seriously. So with PBIS, it's all evidence-based interventions that we do across a multi-tiered system of support for our kids. All it means is we're doing explicit teaching, prompting, modeling, and practicing positive expected social behaviors. And we do that with fidelity, and I'll share with you a little bit about how we take data for that. So in Roanoke County, we have 3 themes. Be safe, of course, number 1, be respectful, and be responsible. What PBIS is not, just to make sure everybody's clear, is it's not permission for students to misbehave or to avoid disciplinary consequences. We definitely have consequences for inappropriate behavior. So Dr. Stegall's part and my part are both guided by a lot of what we do in our VDOE regs, but the PBIS piece actually came under Dr. Nicely when he was in his previous position, because this is a way to help decrease inappropriate behaviors. So we are required to have policy and allocate resources in order to do prevention-based work with our kiddos. So with that, some of the DOE recommendations, and I won't read these all to you, but it's building positive relationships. We know when you have that, a lot of good things happen. We develop and teach classroom expectations. We model those. We reteach when kids don't understand or continue to make mistakes. We look at the data and then we reteach it. We use correction. We try to make sure we have more positives than negatives when we're interacting with kiddos. So what this looks like, and you can think of this in academic areas as well. About 80% of our kids, once they have the expectations, they follow the rules. We have about 10% that need a little more support, and this is for some kids. And then we have 5% of our kids that need a lot of intensive support for behaviors. So most of the time, we can meet kids' needs without a ton of extra resources at the prevention level. When you are doing a PBIS implementation plan with fidelity, you're going to see improved student outcomes and improved teacher outcomes. As a teacher, when I have kids that are being more appropriate in class and following the rules, I tend to be happier in my job. And same with kids. No kid comes to school every day with the idea, I'm going to be as tough as I can today for my teachers.
Can I say, just jump in on that previous slide?
Please.
A lot of people say they do things. You all know I came out of middle school world as a middle school principal. There's a lot of middle schools who have middle school on the front door, but they don't necessarily do the practices of middle school inside. Well, you're not going to get the same results just because you put the name on the front door, unless you're actually doing the practices with fidelity as they're intended to do. One of this is a true story. I was I heard a presentation from a school not in this area, but they said, we tried to do PBIS, but we kind of just, checked off the boxes as best we could, just kind of say we were doing it, but we weren't getting the results. And when they got serious about it, buckled down, did the hard work, and it is hard work to do it consistently because kids need consistency. When you do it consistently, you get the results. And when they did that, and they had people come in to review and check them off and give them outside feedback in terms of how they're doing, not just internally, but outside people coming in and saying, giving the feedback in terms of how it's working. That's when they saw the results. I don't think you're gonna get into this, but when we implemented PBIS in Roanoke County, we did it at different cohorts. So some schools are a little further along than others, but we are seeing the results in the ones in which it's fully implemented, and that's the key to it. That's why we call it Power PBIS, because you've got to do it the way it was intended. And most of our schools are doing real well with that.
Absolutely. All of our schools are doing great. So with that, PBIS aligns with our Sea Change framework. So you'll see two big pieces on that circle are learning culture and school climate. So from our division goals, we have school-wide matrices that explain what the expectation is in every school. So if you go into any of our schools, you're going to see giant posters to say, in the hallway, here's what we expect. In the classroom, here's what we expect. In the restroom, here's what we expect. Because we've got to let our students know what we expect from them for appropriate behavior. And then we drill it down even more to the classrooms have a classroom matrix. So what do we expect in the classroom for appropriate behavior? And they're all aligned to our division, be safe, be respectful, be responsible. So everything's aligned. What does this look like? And this is gonna be a little bit small, but this was an example I stole from Green Valley. You can see their school-wide expectations. They have an acronym called SOAR. Safety first, as always. Offer kindness, act responsibly, and respect staff. So that does go hand in hand with safe, respectful, responsible. Now, in the matrix, when we do these, what's important to note is when we create the expectations, it's not something that I do. It's not something that the principal does. They do that with their entire staff. Everybody has input into this. And then most of our schools also solicit input from the kids, because when I give input or when my kids give input, we have more buy-in. So what the important piece of this is also is it's not telling you, don't do this, don't do that. It's telling you what we expect. So for instance, in the bathroom, walk only, use the toilet, sink, and water fountain correctly, stay seated, walk, walk, walk. That's a big focus in elementary school. You know, kids like to run. So if I'm in my personal life, if you're telling me, don't do that, no doing this, no doing that, don't do that, I tend to get defensive. But when we tell kids what we expect, or you tell me what you expect of me, I tend to understand that better and perform better. So this was an elementary example. Excuse me. This is a middle school example. This happens to be Northside Middle. Every single part of the day, there are set expectations: arrival, dismissal, hallways, bathrooms, cafeteria. So you will see this in every school. All of our schools have this implemented to be in line with our Sea Change framework. Another thing we also do, not me doing, not Dr. Nicely doing, not principals doing, but all of our staff decide together what are office managed behaviors and what are classroom managed behaviors, because we want to make sure we're being consistent when we're working with kids. So what that does is it allows us to, if I'm a teacher and I'm disciplining you because you don't bring a pencil and sending you to the office, and Dr. Stegall teaches the same class, but she has pencils in her class, we're more consistent with kids. When your expectations are consistent, you see positive results. So here are some examples of what that might look like. Teachers manage, a kid doesn't bring their supplies. A kid's sleeping in class, dress code violation, if they're teasing, if they're out of their seat. Those are things we expect teachers to handle. Every school looks a little bit different because they decide in their buildings. Office managed behaviors are things like physical aggression, verbal aggression, of course, threats, hitting, weapons. Those types of things go to the principal. All of our behaviors, whether they're classroom managed or office managed, are recorded in a database for us so we can look at the data. We can actually pull up any school and say, what time of day are you having more issues with classroom disruption? What day of the week? Is there a specific teacher that's struggling more with that? And what we do, it's not a gotcha game, it's how can we support during those times where we see an increase in negative behavior. So another piece under the PBIS umbrella is bullying prevention. This is one piece that's required by the Code of Virginia. And so back in 2019, Dr. Hughes and her staff began to implement our evidence-based program for bullying. It's called Expect Respect. And the way we roll out initiatives, we're not trying to throw new things at teachers and students every year. Bullying is something we're going to work on every year regardless. So we first train our administrators so they know what this program looks like. During the work week or maybe the first month of school, all of our staff are trained. Then our life counselors and school counselors train every student in the division. And then we also, prior to COVID, we had parent community meetings, so parents would also understand. Once we do the training, we don't forget about it. Every single year, we come back and do booster training with our kids and our staff to make sure that we're still implementing with fidelity. So with that, and that Expect Respect seems to be a catchphrase, but with that, I want to show you some data. So what you have is in 2021, we pre-test our kids to know where are you, what do you know about bullying now, and then we post-test after we provide the intervention. So if you're not able to see the numbers, you can see the colors in the chart. So at that time, we started with a baseline of 73 to 83% of our kids understanding what bullying was. However, once the program was implemented, their understanding of bullying and how to respond to bullying went up. But what's more significant is if you look at the next year, 2021, 2022, the baseline started even higher than the year before. So now the baseline was anywhere from 86 to 91%. And look at their post-test average. Our students do understand what bullying is and how to respond to bullying. Anytime I've gone into our schools to work with students, I do some things called student voice activities. We have them share with us, what does that look like? How do you respond to bullying? And they do understand that. So we are definitely making progress. Will bullying go away? Nope. We don't have the magic fairy dust to make that happen, but we certainly have evidence-based strategies to help prevent. Also, I want to share with you how PBIS and discipline consequences are related. So when kids don't meet the expectation, at that point, we work with them to help them understand, redirect them, what should you have done differently? So we help make the connection with kids. Sometimes, when they're younger, they're not able to make those connections. However, if a student's behavior does not change following all of the proactive things we're doing, then it goes to a different level. And then that's not a PBIS preventative measure, it's more of a consequence-based measure. So more severe behaviors that we see, hitting, fighting, anything like that, regardless of whether or not a kid has a history of that, that calls for more intensive consequences. And so Dr. Stegall is going to share with you a little bit about how we handle the reactive part. I always say I get to do the proactive things, you get to do the reactive.
Yes. All right, so we'll talk about our code of conduct. So the Virginia Board of Education is required by law to establish guidelines and model policies for school divisions to implement the code of conduct. So we had a major overhaul a few years ago on our code of conduct, and I'm going to walk you through what some of those changes were. The reason for this is that across the state of Virginia, when you compare discipline numbers, it's important that we're all reporting the same thing. So in order to do that, we had to put the structure in place that all school divisions have to follow. So we start out with student behavior category. So we're talking from the administrative position when there's a consequence, and this is all office managed by our administrators. They have to determine what behavior, what level of behavior it is. So these are the categories they can choose from. There's either academic problems with the student, the lack of self-management in the classroom, self-awareness. There could be problems with school operation, meaning they're interfering with the normal operation of the day. Relationship behaviors is what we see quite often, not getting along. And then safety concerns. And then also we have in danger to self and others. Then we have what's called levels. So the levels are there to help maintain consistency not only across our school division, but across the state of Virginia. So we were given model guidance on how to develop these levels, and you can stay within the level and you can go lower than the level, you just can't go higher than the level. So I'll explain what that looks like. So in Roanoke County, here are our 5 levels. So the level 1 is classroom maintained, like Jessica was talking about. These are supports that the teacher gives in the classroom. Level 2, these can go up to a maximum of a 5-day detention, meaning before school, after school, Saturday school, or in-school detention. That's a level 2. So you can remove them temporarily from the classroom, but not from school with a level 2. A level 3, you can remove from school, and you can remove from 1 to 5 days of suspension. And then a level 4 is a principal can give a 1 to 10 day suspension. Level 5, principals cannot suspend more than 10 days. It has to come to it has to be referred to our DRT committee, which is our disciplinary review team committee, and recommendation with the board for expulsion or long-term suspension. And so on this one, level 5, it can go anywhere from 11 to a 45-day suspension, or it can result in expulsion.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Level 4 and level 5, give me an example.
So level 4 would be fighting typically. There's definitely suspension there.
Can you go back
Cursing-
to that slide,
yeah.
Chuck?
Cursing directly to a staff member would be a suspension. It also, it depends on, like, if a student does some of these level 2 behaviors but keeps doing them multiple times, it would rise to a level 3. And then level 5 would be bringing a weapon on school grounds, would be having multiple fights back to back to back and not changing that behavior. It could be one fight that is, staff tried to prevent it, did everything they could, and it was just a pure-on assault.
I would just further describe that as something like, I call it being vicious. You know what I'm saying? It's not a mutual fight. Hey, we're sometimes friends, sometimes we're not. We get in an emotional heat of the moment, we get into a tussle, and that happens, a mutual fight.
Well, how about-
But when you have somebody who, plans something, they attack somebody, and it's, pretty vicious or whatever, that's probably gonna be more on a level 5.
Well, how about a fight in general is a level 5? Why is it, look, we've discussed the situation at hand from yesterday, and I can tell you from a Benton District standpoint, I will back any principal, any teacher at any moment that says suspension. If you lay your hands on another kid, and I don't care what the reason is. Now, we can have friends that get in a tussle, that's one thing. But if it's to that level, I will back them.
Level 4 and 5, the difference is, in 3, suspension versus expulsion. So something that gets into the level,
But-
the spur of the
Or
moment, kind of, we get into a disagreement, emotional fight, we're done, that's still gonna be a suspension no matter what. That's more your level 3 and 4. Level 5's gonna be more of the, I'm attacking you, assaulting you, that's not like an emotional thing, maybe even plan to do it, right?
All right, but let's ramp that up to the student that has some issues that you see this coming on. We shouldn't wait until that child explodes on someone. For instance, in doing a little bit of homework to get to today, I know we've got several that have been in trouble multiple times, that
Yeah,
it's just a matter of time.
A pattern of behavior could also be a level 5.
Well,
Is that what you're saying?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I want our staff, and again, I hope I speak for all of Roanoke County, but I know I speak for Benton District, that they have the ability to use that level 5, the expulsion, suspension, whatever, much more frequently than we do. I don't want them to be afraid to use that.
I don't think anybody is.
Well, I think they are. Either that or we're just not doing it. And at least in the
We need some more
context.
information, because
Yeah.
I don't think so. But you're not, keep in mind, that's, that can also be an alternative placement, okay? Not necessarily we're kicking you out of
Well,
school. That gets into the
This is a
level 5.
very involved discussion, I get. We got the A-STEP program. It's my understanding that some of these kids, we can't send to that because they may be too, maybe the IEP, or maybe there's.
So in those
maybe
situations,
they're-
we're actually gonna seek alternative placement at a private place.
They wouldn't take them at that place. So now we've got them back. Okay? There's some real issues here that I see. Again, I support the teacher, I support the parent, the teacher and the administrator, and I support you in anything we do. I don't think we're being aggressive enough in stopping this. And I know
Let
we've
us know
got
the
things in
specific
place.
incident you're talking about offline, because that should not be happening.
Yeah.
Well, there's another piece to this. In terms of criminal charges, that's always up to juvenile intake if they're going to obtain, the police officer will go and turn that report in, and they will determine if charges are placed. But I know that they hold the principal's guidance in doing so, regardless of what parents may not want anybody charged. But to set a precedent, maybe we as a school system say zero tolerance. You put your hands on somebody, it needs to go to juvenile intake. The police officer is going to write the report regardless because it's assault and battery. So we want that to go to juvenile intake regardless of what the parents want. Because we're going to have to start setting a precedent here, because I'm seeing a trend and I don't like it. And I'm not going to stand for that, nor am I going to stand for a student. You brought up a valid point just a second ago. Teachers, they didn't get hired, nor should they have to be intimidated or cussed at in a classroom, period. And if that happens, level 5 needs to happen.
Absolutely.
I'm not,
Enough's enough.
I mean, to me, nothing trumps safety to me. And I want my kids to go to school and come home in the same condition, and that's number one to me. So we need to figure this thing out. And I'm not saying that we're not working hard and these steps are not good. It's just, I think that we need to go ahead and start ramping some things up to curb some of this.
And we're request and appreciate the support of parents. And most parents are great, but
That's
you know,
right.
speaking from a principal standpoint, they deal with it every day. You call the parent on both sides of this, and usually and oftentimes they're very supportive. Thank you, we'll take care of it. But too often, right, what parents or principals run into is, folks who are not supportive and want to defend and so forth. And so we, of course, as principals, we want them to hold their ground and do the right thing. We expect them to do that. But we do ask help from the community and from parents. When you get that call from the principal, please be supportive of the school.
Right, well, it's almost like a truancy thing to a certain extent, is you don't get the support from the parent. Well, eventually the legal system gets involved, and sometimes it doesn't operate like we want it to. But in these cases, I think that we need to have a conversation with the chief of police and let them know that, look, regardless of the situation, if assault and battery has occurred to the level that it needs a report written, we want that report going to juvenile intake, regardless of what either party involved wants.
I could speak for the district level. We definitely want that to happen. We'll follow up with the police officers and our SROs to communicate that.
And I can tell you the level 5s that come to us, there's almost always a legal charge. So very rarely have we ever heard a case at level 5 that there has not been a legal charge.
Well, and I think we need to just back that on down to a simple fight.
Yeah.
Go ahead and let the court system get involved, because it's getting to be ridiculous. It's interrupting education. It's
Somebody's gonna
upsetting
get
our
hurt.
staff.
That's
Somebody's
right.
going to get hurt.
Somebody did get hurt.
Yes, but,
Yeah, yeah. So, for Benton District folks, I want to just say, if a parent calls and their child laid hands on another child, I don't want to hear about you're upset about a suspension. It's tough. Should-
And maybe we even need to send a letter to parents explaining, these are the steps that we're going to take moving forward. You need to have these conversations with your kids, because a lot of this comes to the parents.
That's right.
Let's look at the positive side here. I mean, when you look back 2017, 18 year, 18, 19, 19, 20, we were up around 200 fights. I mean, at 23, 43, 60 the last few years. I mean, we're obviously headed in the right direction here.
Yeah, I'd like for Dr. Stigall to go over that, but I know Mr. Ray has a question too.
Mr. Ray?
yeah, well, I was just sort of piggybacking on what the chairman and Mr. Greenway said. We're talking about the 5% that seems to be, and that, if I'm right, about 1,700. I mean, if we got 100 and, we got 140.
Well, we have 13,000 students, so 10% is
13,000,
1,300, so you're talking about 600 kids, the 5%.
Roughly, okay. All right, I got my division wrong. But anyway, how do we, the volatility that's happening, and everybody has seen the video on TV where the 6'6", 200 and some pound knocked the teacher unconscious.
In Florida.
Yeah, in
Right,
Florida.
make sure that's in,
Roanoke
make
County.
sure that's in Florida.
In Florida.
In Florida.
Did you get that, Florida?
And what has happened is, how do we identify a volatile student or situation? I think the switch or whatever game was taken away from the student. Well, evidently they had a confrontation when it was taken away. And how do we protect our students and our teachers? Because that's the number one thing. We don't want to have a situation like this happen in Roanoke County. And we need to be proactive and not reactive after it happens. And that's where, I like the letter going home to the parents to explain that, there is zero tolerance. We're not going to put up with bad behavior. That's it. But how do we identify with the teacher say, you know, I think that we're getting into a pretty volatile situation with this student, walking down the hall and turned around and there they are, you know, knocked them unconscious, you know, in Florida. But, you know, but I just want, you know, how do we?
Part of that, I'll let her address that, but, you know, part of that is knowing your students, right? And so, like you said, you gotta keep a pulse on things, know which ones are more volatile than others and so forth. Dr. Stegall's gonna talk a little about threat assessment and how that works. But knowing your students, I think is definitely where it starts. And then tracking that data, all the stuff that Dr. McClung was talking about too, as far as, you know, the way they track that. Those are all pieces of it. Dr. Stegall is going to just show you some of the numbers in terms of where we stand, kind of put it in perspective, to show there's a difference between what we're actually seeing here and what we've seen historically versus other places and what we've seen historically. There's a reason I think that we see actually some good results compared to historically and where other places. But we got to keep at it. It's a never-ending battle. We're dealing with human beings, right? So you're always educating, training, but also there's consequences, and that requires consistency. That requires support from parents. That requires, you know, good modeling from adults that surround our students. You know, but students also know and finding out that you know, when you act up and do some of these things, I mean, there's definitely going to be consequences for it. And I think one of our secrets to our success, really, in Roanoke County compared to a lot of places, is we do take these things very seriously. I mean, you all know, working with Dr. Stegall, how seriously we take safety and security, and we don't sweep things under the rug. We don't you know, pretend we're doing something, you know, one way, but really doing something else. We're not perfect, but we also take these things very seriously and try our level best to do the right things. But I do want you to go over some of those numbers.
But, you know, just to go back, I still didn't get where would the teacher go or where would the student go to identify to say, you know, this student's, you know, just like see something, say something.
Yeah.
We've always
Oh,
been,
sure.
Yeah.
you know, proactive about that, about situations with guns or whatever. But, you know, this is a situation where, I mean, where does the teacher go? Do we have steps in place that, hey, I'm gonna call down to the office and tell them that this student
We
seems to
do.
be pretty.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit
Oh,
about
okay.
when we get the threat assessment, so I'll hopefully answer
good
your
question.
questions.
Okay.
I got one question to ask. So I know some of that 5%, would it be fair to say that there's some maybe oppositional defiance or some other disorders that are involved in that 5%? I would think it'd be fair to say there probably is. And are we providing all the resources that we can from that direction to try to prevent that as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of times what happens is, sometimes it's all of us together, including with SPED, Director of SPED, and we're always putting our heads together because we're trying to determine best placement, supports, what we need to do. And it takes a team of us to sometimes figure out those type of scenarios. Sometimes I'll tell you what we're running into is when we have kids for a long term, we figure them out, we learn to put supports in place, and we can regulate those students. What we're seeing happening recently is students that come to us from other school divisions, it takes a little bit for us to get to know those students. So sometimes actions are happening before we have really gotten a really good feel for that student. So just like what Dr. Nicely said, we have to learn the student, we have to figure it out, we have to put plans and supports in place. And if that means, you know, this is not the appropriate setting, we've got to put the motion in place to find the best setting for that student. But that takes time to walk through those processes.
Are a lot of these students tuition students or are they
No.
actually resident?
They are transfer students who come in because they move into our area, or sometimes they come into foster situations or residential placements from other areas.
All right. And one other question I have for our staff, are we providing our staff the necessary training to be able to deal with these situations? Because I don't want a situation where the kid's getting wore out and our staff, they need to have the ability to intervene.
Yeah, I think they have MANT training, so they're trained on how to deal with students in that way. And then we also, with the Raptor app, we just went around and implemented where they have team assist. So if they get into a situation where things are out of control, they can quickly call the SRO, the school resource officer, and the nurse to come and assist them. In a lot of those situations, there's hopefully, in some of the classrooms we're talking about where, you know, there may be some students with some IAs, there's more than one adult in the classroom. So if there are behavior needs that are above, you know, in that 5%, Most likely, there's more than one adult in the classroom.
Okay. And they understand their responsibilities and our expectations for them if they do encounter this type of situation.
I think they do.
And we're providing the correct training for that.
And it always requires, reminders, right, and new training, because you have folks coming in, but that's definitely an important part of the process.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, because we are talking about this, one thing I do want to bring up is we're asking for SROs. If an SRO hadn't been present in one of these situations, it could have turned out a lot worse. And I was told that the situation, would have went on for a time period until you could have got the appropriate folks engaged. So Board of Supervisors, SROs in all of our schools, we need that. Our principals know these kids. I don't know if it's a time to get those principals together at the various levels and see what they think, but I'm ready to move these kids, if need be, and that's where I go back to this A step. If that's what that's for, then that's what that's what we've provided it for. We've got an alternative area. I've heard from one of our administrative folks that we need the cook, that back, where we can you don't wait until they get to that level. You're identifying them as you go along. There's a problem. Let's send them to the alternative program. And, they have the opportunity. If you want to get back into the mainstream of our student population, you've got to show us that you're willing to put in the work. And over here's the alternative program. Now, that's going to cost us some money, but we got the A-STEP program. But if that's not where these kids can be sent, and I'll speak to you later about a few of these kids, then I'm not sure what we're spending that money on. But that's what I assumed when we started this program, is that we could send those kids to this program.
We'd like to expand the program. That program has been a huge success. I don't know the numbers that we're serving currently. We would like to expand it.
But kids that some of these alternative places won't take, if we have to do that, then we need to have that alternative opportunity where we can send these kids.
Agreed.
It's just a zero tolerance thing. I can't face a parent whose child gets put in the hospital over something like this. So it's just going to have to be a zero tolerance thing.
Yep.
We appreciate y'all's
Thank
support
you.
on that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so discipline code violation levels, let's see, that's going the wrong way. Just to give you an example of what our principals have to look at, so there is a chart that is developed. If you see the behavior codes right here, these are the codes that when we talked about behavior, like here's the behaviors related to school operations, right? So they have to find that behavior code, then they have to go in there, and then they have to look at which one of these best fits what they're looking for. So once they find the description of that incident with that student, then they have to look over here and you see elementary and secondary. These are the levels that are assigned to for the discipline in those categories. So the idea is you have to stay within this chart, in this realm. You can go lower, but you can't go higher. Now, this is one that talks about, for example, like dress code violations. You're not going to see anything on this one because it only goes to level 3. You're not going to see anything here that's going to be violent or anything like that. Interferes with the operation of school. That could be, if that's on a lower scale. And the way this works is, if you look deep enough, for example, there's a couple ways to define fighting, right? You can have fighting with injury, fighting with no injury. You can have pushing, and it's almost like defined as horseplay. And then you can have situations that could cause a safety issue for the child. You could put a slap boxing situation in multiple tiers, right? So when you look at these numbers, you have to realize that every school and every division are placing these infractions however they view it, right? So we'll talk about that when we get to these numbers a little bit. But just to give you an example of what our principals are using to help them.
Is this what we developed, or is this state developed? So we're putting parameters on our teachers as to what they can do.
This is principals only.
Principals.
The administration.
Okay. So there's guidelines.
There are.
Well, I mean, for example, a
can't
dress
read
code
it.
violation,
can't read
that's
it.
not gonna be a level 5. I mean, if you
No,
look- if you
I
look- if you-
get that, but,
Right.
you know, come on.
If you see something up there that's not reasonable, let's talk about it, but I mean. if
Well,
you
can
look
we
at
get a
it, it's-
copy of that?
Oh, yeah, we can give you a copy.
Sure.
And just so you know, our principals all vetted this, and we did that last year and asked them for any feedback. And it fits, everything we've done in the past fits right in here. They didn't give us any feedback and said, this is not working for us, we need to expand the level. I have not heard any of that feedback. So I think they feel comfortable with it, that it is leveled appropriately. But if it's not, we can certainly adjust it, so. And then this one is, we created this for them, and you can see the levels on the left. This is just a whole group of responses that they can also add in. You're going to have the discipline response, but these are things like threat assessment, suicide assessment, counseling, referral to the life counselor, check-in, check-out, referral to the IEP team. It's just all the possible options you can think of under each level. So that's just to help them scan through there to make sure they've covered all the bases. It's in order. Sometimes principals are like, okay, how do I support this kid? You have a kid in the classroom starting to be a little volatile. What is it that I can do? They can go here and read through these levels and think, oh yeah, we haven't done that yet. Let's try that. So it's just giving them a list of things to consider. So when we talk about suspension and expulsion, it's a balancing act, right? Because research will say that excluding kids from school, meaning if you suspend or expel them, reflects negatively on them as an individual. So they tend to have distrust. They have a higher fail rate. They have more misbehavior. It just continues. Chronic absenteeism, dropout. All these things come from the results of constantly suspending kids. But here's the balancing act, right? We have to address the behavior. When a discipline rises to a certain level, we're going to suspend, potentially expel, because we have to balance the negative impact that has on all the other students in the building, and we have to ensure safety for everyone in the classroom. So although we take this in consideration that it could be detrimental to that student, what we can also do is when we expel kids, you'll talk about in a minute, we put supports and wraparounds for that student. They're not going back into that school, but we're still going to support them and wrap around them to accommodate those concerns that we see there from research. So we do our best effort to try to balance that. So some of the things that we consider to support, these are just in the school day, so in the school. All students who are suspended, they automatically are going to get their academic work. We've never withheld that from students who are suspended. We also have the option of in-school detention, which keeps them in the building. There is some thought about rather than, and here's the thing, all parents parent differently, right? So when you suspend kids, some kids are at home playing video games, sleeping late, and it's a vacation day. Some kids who get suspended, the parents have them doing chores and have them making sure they do their homework. These kids over here that aren't doing their work, they're getting behind in their education. So sometimes principals consider putting kids in in-school detention because now we get to supervise and we ensure that they're doing work. And they don't like in-school detention because they're held accountable and they're not playing video games and it's not a vacation day. So sometimes in-school detention is given because we realize the freedom that the kid's going to have at home. So some of the things we'd also do in school detention is have an opportunity to counsel, right? So if the kid has some problems with anger, we can always get the counselor, the life counselor, to pull the kid out and spend some time counseling. We can do group counseling. We can do restorative practices. Basically, if two kids aren't getting along, let's talk about it. Let's resolve the issue. Let's take accountability for your actions in that. And then at the A-STEP program, we have this Botvin skills, and it's basically a module program that walks students through appropriate social and emotional skills. The idea of when we put them in alternative education is to build up skills, right, and get them prepared to where they're ready to go back into the regular school without repeating those behaviors. So a lot of what we focus on there is educate, kind of like what PBIS is, but on a different level, and talk about these behaviors are unacceptable. Here's what's going to happen before you can go back into your normal classes. Another thing we do when kids are suspended, we do a re-entry plan. So what principals do is when the kid comes in, the parent brings them in, they sit down and have a meeting, they create a contract. So basically, they can put the student on restrictions of, you can't go to the bathroom without an escort. We're going to search your backpack every single morning. We're going to search you every morning, right, depending on what the incident was. So they create that contract for reentry. That student has to follow that contract. Once they see that they are successful with that contract, they back down on those restrictions. So that includes constant monitoring. So those are some of the things that our schools are doing to manage students when they're suspended and then returned back to school. Long-term suspensions and expulsions. Anytime that's 10-day or more, and that's a recommendation to the disciplinary review team, and that meeting has to be held within 10 days of the suspension. I'll tell you who sits on that committee because I think we have a wealth of knowledge on that committee. It's myself and Dr. McClung, and then we have the Director of Special Education, the Executive Director of Instruction, and we have the Director of Counseling and Special Education. So when a student comes to the DRT hearing, if it was a threat situation, we have the threat assessment, we have the clinical mental health assessment, then we have all the records, all the discipline, all the academics, all the attendance, and we have the parents sitting there. So it gives us an opportunity to really ask some very direct questions. We talk to the student, and we have a really in-depth team there that can think about the mental health, can think about the discipline, can think about the special ed component. And then that team listens to all the information and makes the determination of the best placement for that student. Sometimes that looks like and if it rises to such a level, we automatically refer it to the board, to you, for expulsion. If we feel as if our contract and our plan is not going to suit this situation, we're going to refer it to the board for expulsion automatically. A lot of times what it would look like under a contract, it would be alternative ed, which would be our A step. Sometimes students return to school on a contract. So that would be a contract that's developed between the team here and with the principal. And that's rare, but that does happen sometimes. Then we can refer to the IEP team for private day placement. And then also sometimes we consider online coursework or administrative home-based where the student's doing work at home. So all of those options are on the table, and we make decisions that fit. There's a lot of situations where the act has caused a safety issue in the school, and we're not going to send the student back to the building because they're not ready to go back to the building. They have to build some skill work before they can go do that. So we will build in a contract for each individual student. So the threat assessment process, I'll tell you a little bit about that. When you talk about school safety, the statistics will tell you the number one most important thing you can do is do threat assessments and do them well. I think our school division does them very well. We've all been trained. It's all of our school administrators, our school counselors, our life counselors, and our school psychologists, and our SROs have all been trained. They all sit on the committee. So this is a committee that's coming in, and every school has a team. They've been trained by DCJS, Department of Juvenile Services, and it's the same training that the police officers receive. So this team comes in, they listen to the threat, they thoroughly investigate the threat, and then what they do is they level the threat. So it's either low, moderate, high, or imminent. So if it's moderate or higher, we automatically refer the student for a clinical mental health assessment. What that means is our life counselor, our school psychologists are going to do a deep dive in the mental health of that student and come back with some recommendations for the team. So a lot of times students will talk to the counselors more than they will the administration. And so they also do testing on students, and they come back with really, really solid, good recommendations. So then what happens is that information comes to the DRT team, and then we have all of that information to help make decisions. And then, of course, we put them on a contract here, and sometimes it could be expulsion. Our goal is to provide a safe environment for all students, not just that student, but all students in the school. So if we feel like if it's not in the best interest for that student to return back to that school, we do not return that student. Also, we have to think about, which I've talked before, we've got to make sure kids have a certain skill set and they're ready to go back. So we consider their mental health, we consider their ability. Some kids have anger management problems. Well, we've got to get that in check before we're going to send you back to that building. So what we also do is we ask parents to sign releases. So we talk to outside counselors, we talk to outside psychiatrists. We get all the information we can possibly get. And then we create constant monitoring. And then if they're successful in that placement or wherever they're at, we always review at the next school year if they're ready to return. If they're not ready to return, they don't. But if they have successfully done all the things we have asked them to do, then they could have the potential to come back to school if we feel like they're ready. Usually most of the time it doesn't happen within 9 weeks. It's usually a semester. Some kids stay in alternative for an entire year. It just depends on the situation. All right, any questions about any of that before we move on to let's take a look at these statistics that we have here and show you what this is all about. So on the left, you will see that what we decided to look at was, as we talked about before, okay, you have to understand that these years at the bottom, several years ago, we revamped all of this, so the codes changed. But we're also comparing the same codes across every school division. So we decided to take a look at fighting with no injury and fighting with minor injury, and then also disruptive demonstration. Remember, you can look across here and you will see this. You can see how certain school divisions put things in certain categories, right? Because some people have a lot of disruptive demonstration and some don't have many at all. So, and that's the reason why, because they're placing them in different categories. So you can scroll through all these school divisions at the top, and we start at the most recent at the top. So you see those numbers there. They're our current numbers to date in Roanoke County. And then if you scroll down to 21-22, just kind of take a scroll across, and you can see the number of incidents. So these are the actual numbers of incidents that took place in all of these school divisions.
Where you see the blue boxes, we just don't have that available. So current year data, we only have for our own division. And this is all publicly available information, so anybody can look this up and compare. And our purpose here today is not to knock what happens other places or anything like that. We chose divisions that are like ours, similar size, dissimilar demographics. We don't think it's fair to say, okay, well, we're doing a whole lot better than, some places that maybe have more challenges or whatever. But it does, again, it provides a little bit of perspective. Not that we don't have work to do, and not that we don't need to continue doing what we're doing, but it just puts in a little bit of perspective.
And then the blue box that's marked out, the VDOE changed the way they were receiving this information, and it's not available for that time frame. It was done by region at that time, so we were unable to pull those numbers. So any questions about any of that? Okay.
When did the PBIS kick in originally? 2000. Which kind of corresponds with.
Started with 9 schools that year, the next year we added 10.
It's all about doing it with fidelity. You have to do it the right way. And I would argue that, because when it's done other places and people say, oh, it doesn't work. Well, they're probably not doing it with fidelity. The way our results are, again, not that we're perfect, but I think there's a reason why we're getting better results than a lot of other places that are similar to us.
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned earlier, you look from 3 previous years before PBIS kicked in, and our numbers are down significantly.
But to the point, our administrators know the kids, and those kids, and I
They do a
don't.
great job.
Yeah, but I'm not sure they feel they can go to the A-STEP program. Do we have a limit? I know we used to have limits on what we could send to, who was it we used to send them to? Hope Tree, that we had limits on the number of kids that could go there, so we just had to deal with them. That was the reason, I hope, we started the A-STEP, and that was to take some of that pressure off.
And my view of that, and I think I'm so glad that you all supported that, because I think it's really been a big help, and I think the schools would say that. And again, I think we should talk offline about some kind of specific situation, but my view, and you can correct me if you think it's different or whatever, but if there's some questionable cases, hey, there might be or whatever, maybe that's one thing, but I would just sit here and say that if we ever had a situation, I don't care if there's a placement or not, whether it's A-STEP, outside, whatever, if they've done something that we feel like they just cannot be back in our school no matter what, then our view is we stand behind that. And we try our best to find
Well,
a
but what
placement,
about
but-
those that are chronic and they're just waiting to happen, similar to what happened?
Same thing, and again, if you have some specific incidents that we need to talk offline about, happy to look at it, because I don't know what you're thinking, but absolutely, that could fall
Well,
in the same category.
let's just say generically, at Mike's school, that he had, Haley ought to have that ability to say, look, this is a chronic, I need to move this person offline for a month or 2 months. I need to get their
Absolutely.
attention. Or, this is one that is a serious offender, not to the level that we would, but it's coming. And there's, some transgressions that we need that person to go. There's not pushback on that.
I can honestly tell you that anytime a principal has had that conversation with me, our response is, okay, bring them to DRT. Every single time,
Okay.
every
Good
single
enough.
time.
And I'm not saying they have, I'm not, so that's good. I just want to know that that's the case.
Yeah.
Because in some of these instances, I want to be able to say to the principal, look, you knew it was coming too, right? If you knew that, we should have moved this child into a situation where he was better suited to be handled, right?
And I just want to say on record, we have fantastic principals. I mean, I just
Oh,
can't tell you.
absolutely.
And I know you support them, all of you support them, but, we have 27 schools, and I would put them up
But I
against
want them to
anybody in the
know
state.
this.
Absolutely.
That's not, my speech here
I'm not
is
saying that to you. I'm
not-
saying this for the good
I'm
of the
saying
public.
this in support of those.
That's
If
right.
you have kids that need to be an alternative, we have place for them now.
And that's my point in saying that is, we have great principals, and we do trust their judgment, and like she's saying, if they're coming to Dr. Stegall and saying we need to go to DRT, then
There you go.
And you're hearing it right here that you have that ability.
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
One thing about A-STEP, I did want to tell you, there's two parts to A-STEP, so I'm not sure what you're hearing, but there is a limit on the group that's called Gateway. So every school gets 2 placements, and those are kids who are not in trouble. These are kids who need to catch up some credits to graduate on time, so that's a whole different section. So if you're hearing there's a limit to A-STEP, that's the only program that has a limit. They
That's
only
not-
get
that's
so,
not
but that's a good
related.
point. So there's some students that just come to school. They're not going to do anything. They're sitting in class, but they're not participating. They're not doing anything, right? I mean, A-STEP should be perfect for them too, or virtual. We were so happy with virtual during COVID. Let's fire that back up if we need to. My point is, to Brent's point, is if it's 5%, and then we need to move that 5% out of the way to let the rest flourish, because 95% do want to flourish.
That's right.
And again, this comes honestly from experience of being the kid you didn't want in class, not from physical standpoint, but from disruptive and all that stuff. So, we need to, if we've got that available, let's use it.
And I will tell you that A-STEP too, for the discipline situations, there's never not room for them, because that program was designed for this. So if that ever was to happen, we are expanding, we're getting close to busting out the seams, but all we would do is just hire another staff member to help expand. But we're gonna have to expand in this space, because we're gonna need more space, and we've already started that process. But what we need to do, but anytime a discipline issue and a student needs to go to A-STEP, we're going to move out one of the gateway kids if we have to get that student in there, because that takes priority. So we're never going to say we don't have room in A-STEP. Now, there are criteria of students that we can accommodate in A-STEP. So that's where the discrepancy is.
Like,
Special ed, you have to have special
Okay.
ed teachers.
IEPs and
And we
stuff.
don't have special ed teachers in
Okay.
there, but we are proposing for the next budget that we consider that.
okay.
So that would help us.
But again, even in those situations, IEP or not, if they're, assaulting somebody or don't belong in the school, then we're gonna find a different placement for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might add, if you don't mind. I had an experience, I happened to be here talking to a parent I happened to be over here and I called the parent, I think I was on for about 45 minutes. And she said that, her child was in A-STEP and was disruptive, being very disruptive. I said, I asked one of the staff, I said, check on this. went back there and it wasn't true. Said the student was calm, everything was going okay. So, we gotta know that, what we got in this, they say A-STEP program is working. We need to expand it. We need to make sure we identify who needs to be there, and we need to place them in there. And I have the confidence, once they're in there, that they'll be not what I heard on the phone. So,
No, I can honestly report we've never had one discipline issue in that program, not one.
I've heard that it's doing well. I just wondered if we were restrictive to numbers.
So I think the biggest thing is we've let our staff know the expectations. We're giving them the tools and the support needed to get these kids where they need to be placed if put in that position. Everybody's comfortable with that, what we're currently doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
We do appreciate the board's support. Y'all been nothing but supportive in terms of even letting us start that A-STEP program. That was a new venture. We wanted to do that in-house. It's been very successful. You've supported, the proactive stuff in terms of making sure we have adequate number of counselors. You've supported when, we do bring folks to you, in terms of needing alternative placements and expulsions and so forth. And I think you all set the right tone for that, and we do appreciate your support. I know our principals appreciate it as well.
okay. All right. So there has been some questions about, how are we responding to the transgender students and the status of the law, Virginia model policies and how that's related. We currently are under Virginia school boards, and we must follow the following. Currently prevailing federal law case in the Fourth Circuit, Grimm versus Gloucester County Public School Board decision. The Fourth Circuit covers Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. The U.S. Supreme Court did not intervene in this situation, so we, of course, are bound to the outcome of the Grimm versus Gloucester court hearing. So how is that handled in Roanoke County Public Schools? Students are required to use the restroom corresponding to their biological sex, except as required by federal law, currently the Grimm case. A support plan is developed with the student and the student's parents. What happens is the student and the parent and the counselor sit down and create a support plan, and then have conversations around that, and then proper bathroom behavior is expected and enforced just like any other student. What is next? Currently, the VDOE is developing new model policies. They began in 2022, but they are still under review and at the state level, and revisions are expected in April. So once those revisions are sent out, of course, we will all review those, and they will come to the board because that would probably impact policy changes. Any questions about any of that?
Thank you, Dr. Skull.
Sure, thank you.
Item 2.11, report on compensation study. Mr. Jim Bradshaw. Still awake over there?
Yes, sir, I am. They want me to make a lot of noise so they can get their food open over there, so I'm trying to stall and make noise.
Y'all didn't bring enough for everybody?
Mr.
That's what
Chairman,
I'm
can we
saying.
take a 3-minute bathroom break?
Sure.
This will be the next phase. We'll take a little 3-minute bathroom break.
Yep, that's good.
Watch my drink, David.
basically for the most part of this current school year. And today we're bringing to you the final presentation or results, if you will. And I have Mr. Steve Foster with me from MAG, who's going to go through his part of the presentation. I will let you know that the final overall report is included in the board docs. If you want to go through the 260-some pages worth, we are not doing that.
That version.
In this session, which, unless you would like me to, I'll be glad to. But we're going to hit the highlights. I'll hit a couple things, and of course, we'll answer any questions as we go through it. And then following this will be Ms. Peterson, who will kind of start wrapping it all together, what it's going to look like as far as our budget process. So with that, I'm going to give it to Mr. Foster.
Good afternoon. I just want to, first of all, I want to thank Human Resources for all their help during the course of this study. We couldn't have done it without them. They've been extremely helpful. What I want to do today, though, is I just want to present the findings and the recommendations that we came up with as a result of the classification and compensation study. First, just a little bit of background on our company. We've done hundreds of these types of studies around the country over the last 25 years. And I can personally attest to the Virginia portion of that. I've been doing a lot of Virginia studies over the last year or so. It's become my second home, and aside from the Delaware plates I currently have on my rental car, I really do feel like I'm here at home in Virginia. So,
Oh, it's in the end.
so what we do with this study is
That's
we-
the budget.
we came up with a lot of positions that were designated by the Roanoke County Public Schools. We analyzed all those positions over the course of our study. We wanted to compare what we found to other markets around the Commonwealth to make sure that that you all were competitive with that market. So basically, what we wanted to do also on the classification side of things is we wanted to address internal equity. So we took a look at all the jobs within Roanoke County schools. We made sure that any jobs that were similar in either duties or responsibilities or both, we wanted to make sure that any of those that were similar were grouped together for classification purposes, make sure that the pay was equitable. So we took a look at your current plan. We made our recommendations on what should be changed. And again, we also took a look at stipends as part of this study and compared the stipends here with ones with your competitors to make sure that we had a firm handle on that as well. As far as the methodology goes, we conducted interviews with your leadership. We also captured job duties and responsibilities either through your current job descriptions, but mostly through these questionnaires that we developed. And I do want to point out that we got a really good response to the questionnaires from the employees. We sent out over 1,000 questionnaires, well, out to 1,000 employees. The same questionnaire, just 1,000 employees. But considering the timing, we started this in early December, and it ran through the first week in January. So right over the holiday season, which is asking for, it's asking a lot, but we got back over 75% response from the people that we sent these questionnaires out to. So that was very impressive, especially considering the time of year that we asked for those. We've sent those out with other clients at better times of the year and haven't gotten negative response. So we were very, very happy with that. It wouldn't be a PowerPoint presentation without a flow chart, so this is ours. And the way this works, I just wanted to kind of show you the balance between internal equity, which is again where we look at the jobs within the school district, versus external equity, where we compare Roanoke County Public Schools to the local market. Once we get all those findings back, the results there are kind of at the bottom. We come up with a proposed salary schedule. We come up with adjustments based on what we find in the market. We come up with organizational cost calculations, which is what we're talking about is going to be in the final report. And then we come up with an implementation plan because we have to come up with something that's going to be affordable to the school district. This is, I referred to the questionnaire earlier. This is what we were asking the employees to do. We were asking them to measure their level of responsibility for these 14 different job factors. And this is what allows us to come up with a classification plan based on the varying degrees of responsibility for each of these factors and how it applies to each job within the district. Also wanted to show you some of the people we were comparing Roanoke County schools to. This is a list of all the school districts. There were 11 of them. We also did a lot of the counties and some of the municipalities, including City of Roanoke and Roanoke County. And at the bottom here, that ONET, that refers to private sector information. Private sector information is not nearly as easy to attain as public sector. And the reason that is a lot of times when we're doing these surveys, when we call and ask for that information, a public sector organization is willing to cooperate because eventually they're going to be in the same boat. They're going to need a study like this, and they're going to want other people like Roanoke County Public Schools to cooperate with them as well. So we have a nice agreement with them, and they're pretty helpful. Private sector, not so much. A lot of times they just tell us, go fly a kite. So we have to rely on Department of Labor data, and that's where this ONET information comes into play. So it does allow us to compare private sector positions, especially in jobs like IT and other positions where they're not just competing within a school district, they're competing heavily in the public sector, private sector.
And I'll tell you what, flipping slides, there is an entire list in the final presentation of every single government agency and things like that that they did compare with. It's in that final report.
Right, this one's a little bit abbreviated. I did include all the school districts, but I had to kind of cut down on the counties and municipalities just so they would all fit onto a slide here. But just like Jim said, yes, sir.
Other sectors that you were talking about, if they're unionized, is that data available?
Most of the time, yeah, we can still get union data for the most part. Sometimes we run into issues with, when we have a client that has a union position, sometimes we run into an issue where maybe the union tells him not to worry about filling out the questionnaire or something to that effect, so we do have those issues. But when it comes to gathering the data from the public sector organizations, union isn't usually a factor. We can still get the information pretty freely.
Okay.
And I will tell you, we do cooperate with all the others. We get a lot of these requests, and we fill out the data for them too, so.
Right, so yeah, that's what I was referring to earlier. I mean, we don't have that relationship with private sector, of course, but public sector wise, that does help a lot. So as a result of our market survey, we did find out that going into this study, we had several jobs that were already competitive, like Dean of Students, instructional assistants, and nutrition associates.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I really feel like those at least the second and third one, if you recall, last year we did a big adjustment on those two areas specifically, and I think it has definitely helped us as far as that goes. So I'm not shocked at that, but it is something thanks to you all for doing that adjustment, because if not, I felt like those would have probably been in the bottom category.
Oh yeah, that definitely gave you
yes.
all a leg up having that extra work done on those beforehand. And then if you look at the ones down below, these are some of the positions that were not that competitive going in, and that would have been some HVAC people, along with a physical therapist, speech pathologist, and like I said earlier, technology technicians. And again, that's because of a lot of private sector competition as well.
When you say physical therapist, is that related to SPED?
It is OTs, PTs, yeah, they do special services for our students.
Oh, okay.
And they also, I'll say, they've got a private sector as well that we're competing against, private agencies and things like that. I'm sure Dr. McClung could speak to a lot more intelligently than I could, but it is
They're
definitely.
for students, though, if that's what you're asking, special education students.
Right,
Same thing with
correct.
speech pathologists.
Yeah.
I will throw a plug in for them real quick. They are amazing.
Oh, they are.
They are great. We have got some wonderful. Jennifer on Glenver side is amazing.
Right, good deal.
And we also did on the questionnaires, I don't think I mentioned this part, but the teachers didn't participate in the questionnaires, mainly because we wanted to make sure that the people we were trying to get information from on the questionnaires were people that have different types of jobs, trying to make sure that they're classified correctly. A lot of jobs have changed over time, evolved a little bit. So that's where the questionnaires came into play. We wanted to make sure that we were capturing what the people are doing now, not what they used to be doing. But for the teachers, we did a separate study. We did a teacher comparison where we went around and checked the different salary scales from the different school districts. So based on those results, this is what we came up with for teachers with a bachelor's degree. starting with 5 years of experience. They were just a little bit behind, about 3.5%. That came up a little bit at the 10-year point, just under 2%. And then that went back up at 15 years and also at 20 years, where they were about 4% behind and then 3% behind as far as a lag. So we've addressed those issues in the plan we've come up with now. But that's strictly from the teacher comparison that we ran for the districts around the Commonwealth. And this is the estimated cost for implementation. It does include a 7% cost of living adjustment. So also part of the implementation plan, once we have that across the board in place, we also have to address if we've changed pay grades, we have to make sure that anybody that moved into a new pay grade is at least at the minimum. So we call that our adjustment to minimum. And then we also have an equity adjustment where we go in and you look at people that have been with the district for a while. We have to alleviate any kind of compression. And what that is people that are at the bottom or that have just started, based on today's climate as far as hiring practices go, sometimes you're hiring people at a higher rate than the people that have been there a while were hired at. So right away, you have the new people press it up against the people that have been there for a while. So what the equity adjustment does is it allows some separation for the people that have been with the district for a while from the people that are just coming on board. So all of those factors go into the implementation cost.
And I do want to say quickly, this is a 7% average. It's not a 100%, 7% for everybody. So keep in mind that that is an average, what they built in for the schedule. So, and the reason that teachers, and Ms. Pearson's going to go over all this, we do have a couple options for what we do with teachers. And so we asked them to give us some options, and then she's going to present those to you, I think, a little bit later on.
Right, we put to be determined on here, but we came up with the range depending on the scenario that you go with between 6.2 million and 8.2 million was the range. So, but yeah, there'll be more detail on that.
The fringe benefits would add what percentage? 3%, 5%, 10%?
Well, fringe benefits aren't part of this. This is all.
I know, I see that.
Oh.
I saw that on the
Oh,
bottom. I
you
mean,
say-
if
you did.
well, yeah. What is, I guess, an
I thought we
estimated
included
fringe
Ms.
benefit?
Peterson.
The number that he's given you, because you have to, what he's given you is for all employees. And when I present, I'll break it down by fund and with the benefits and everything. So I'll give all of that to you to be in a little bit.
Okay.
Right, they don't
It's
have
gonna be a lot more
information like,
expensive than that.
yes, they have information on like the grant funds and
Right.
insurances and all that. This is strictly just, right, moving them.
Normally, it would probably be 30 to 40%.
30 to
It's
40.
38%, if that's what you're asking. What we figure for FICA, healthcare, all those other type things is what we normally calculate.
So 3.8 million becomes 5.6.
Pretty quick.
It does.
Keep going, and so, yeah.
Should they-
And this is about 2%, I would have, right? Am I wrong about that? 2% of our budget?
Yeah, but I wouldn't even pay attention to that number right
Yeah,
now,
this is a number
because-
that they can't.
Well,
we've
that's
got this-
because it's gotta be added to it, but I get that.
Sorry.
Yeah,
But raw cost,
yeah. She'll give you the exact ones.
Okay.
This is from the study, and of course,
Right.
as we've,
Jumping at the bit.
yeah.
So then this is what we're looking to do, come up with the classification levels for the individual assignments. And that's where I was referring to the equity adjustment, where we go in there and make sure that people that have been here for a while are being compensated versus the people that just started, so that there's an equal pay there. We did come up with a new pay steps. And the way that works is for the teachers originally, there was a 1.5% difference between the teacher steps. And for the non-teachers, there was a 2% gap between the steps. So we wanted to come up with something that was more equal. So when one's moving in a step, it's more equal. So we settled on 1.6% for both teachers and for non-teachers. So that just kind of brings both of the pay steps more in line with each other versus how they were before.
And that will also help address, some of the teacher scales we moved down there. You saw we're like 3% behind and 4%. That's going to alleviate and fix a lot of those issues.
Exactly.
Just because of that.
Exactly. So, and then we also, a goal is to adopt the changes to the stipends based on what we found in our report. And then our ultimate goal is to implement the new compensation plan in time for the next fiscal year, which is going to be July 1st.
I'm assuming Ms. Peterson has that money ready.
She does. I think she was growing it before we came in.
Just got to go get it off the tree, huh?
I kind of killed that tree.
I've got quickly, Mr. Chairman, just briefly, like a few slides to just kind of wrap up a little bit on our part. That was the best slide right there for South Carolina. That's what we need. Yeah,
I didn't see that.
that's my screen.
Show 'em
saver.
again, but
I don't know,
ready to see
when
that.
it flips off.
You don't know
I'll see
how
if
to
I can
get it
do
back.
I'll make sure you see it.
What kind is it?
It's a Harley, but we won't need to get into that. Yes, I would much rather be,
Are we compensating him too much?
no, I assure you. Thank you, Mr. Greenway.
We're not on that list.
No, I wasn't on the list. So basically, just the why for us, we want to be competitive. I mean, and I feel like that we truly want to attract the most outstanding teachers, outstanding HVAC, bus drivers, whatever job title we're looking at to Roanoke County Schools. And I feel like everybody in our entire division, whether you're talking about teachers, bus drivers, they're advocating for Roanoke County, but they needed our support from the top. So that's one of the reasons that you asked us to do the compensation study. We definitely want to be competitive because we want to attract, retain, and keep those great employees, because that's the only way we're going to get our kids opportunity ready. And so that's truly was our focus from the central office side of why this needed to take place. Just a couple quick things. Our goal was to have the percentage, and Mr. Foster mentioned that, to be competitive between both scales, the support and the teacher scale. As he mentioned, the new plan will have a 1.6% difference between steps, and so that's moving across the scale. So again, depending on what we're able to do each year, sometimes we're able to do just the steps. So that would be a 1.6 for everybody. Some years we're able to do 3%. So that might be a 1.6 plus a percentage change. But we wanted to be consistent. But I do want to show you the big thing here is that our current pay plan, $13.35 was our minimum hourly rate for our lowest pay plan. Now we're moving to a $15.60. So I do feel like that we're going to start being able to be competitive with a lot of the markets. And again, we did black out a couple areas with the IAs and things like that, which did help us move closer to this. But this is definitely going to help in that direction as well. So with that, we'll take any questions or whatever. And like I said, the entire full report is in board docs there, so you can go through that 261 pages. But I feel really good about where we are now. There's been a lot of back and forth between us and MAG in the past 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks probably, really tweaking and adjusting and understanding what I felt some of our needs were in Roanoke County Schools as well, along with what they felt some of our needs were to be market competitive. And I really think like we've come up with a great plan. Now it just depends on what kind of tree Ms. Peterson's grown and to see if we're able to have enough money to fund all this.
Mr. Chairman, one quick question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned steps. Are we changing the 30 step to?
That's part of it.
Steps.
We do have a plan for teachers both that go to 30 steps, which is what our current plan is. Now, again, that 30 step is a lot farther down now because, as I was explaining earlier, if you go 1.5 between steps of 4, it was 1.5 to step 2, then 1.5 again. Well, now you've gone 1.6, and then you're going 1.6 again. So now you're actually doing a point percentage more.
When he does this,
each
he
one you
means
go.
this, because they're increasing.
I'm sorry, yeah, as you get, right. In my pay chart, they go down the page, but yes, as you go up in years, they go, so the spread is farther, so the top are gonna be getting, they'll be helped out, which will help the percentages that we saw, we got the year 20, and so.
And they're going to present that as options as part of the budget, because there's a 30-step option. Again, that 30th step's going to be higher than it is currently now, the maximum, because we're going to the 1.6. But they'll also present, what it would cost to do the 35 steps. And this
Correct.
will become a decision we have to make.
And we are still staying on this.
Option to add steps beyond 30.
Yes, sir, and truthfully, the way that that's built is if we ever did, let's say this year we decided to adopt the 30 and we wanted to go farther the next year, we know it's a 1.6, so you could, if need be, increment that down the road if you needed to. So that is one of the reasons we wanted to be very consistent across the board where they were the same.
One question, Mr. Chairman. Do you see that the plop is an incentive to go those 3 extra years?
For me,
Not for you.
100% yes.
Overall.
For yes, I'm gonna tell you yes. Our employees, that's a VRS thing that we're so fortunate to be a part of, and I think our teachers, especially our young teachers, don't realize our retirement plans are so great.
Yeah.
I never realized it either, but now that I've gotten on the other side and I'm getting much closer to that, it is a huge benefit to our employees.
So beyond the 30 step, at that extra 3 years,
Correct.
if we see this 35 steps, then that would be an incentive as well.
It would be, absolutely it would be. And of course, everything comes with a cost, as you
Oh,
know.
sure.
So it just depends on what we can truly implement and put in. I will tell you that on the support side, we are staying with a 30-step. We're not recommending going any farther than that. But that's kind of where we are with that. Because that's not based on total years. In other words, step 5 is not because you've been here for 5 years. Where a teacher right now truly is, if you're on 6, you're in year 6 of teaching. If you're on 20, you're on year 20 of teaching. So it's
So
very.
we're service industry, of course.
Mhm.
We're at 84, 86% of our budget goes towards salaries and benefits.
Yes. I want to think it was 86 or 87%. Ms. Pierce, I'm sure has that exact dollar.
It's
but
incredible that you can operate on 14% for everything else.
it is. It's amazing. And just keeping that budget in line is quite a.
The response rate at 75% was great, but I think you said it only went to 1,000 people? I mean, aren't we closer to?
Right, 1,000.
2,000 employees?
Well,
1,200 employees is actually what it went to, because we have, and that's on the support side.
It didn't go to teachers.
It didn't
Right,
go to
the
teachers.
questionnaire was not part of the teacher.
So we have pretty much 50% where our employees are ratio. We have half of them are on the support side, half are on the teacher scale. We're within 100 employees of having the exact 50-50.
And the reason for not including the teachers in that?
Was mainly because the questionnaire is designed to update job duties for jobs that have evolved over time, and the teacher's duties are pretty
Standard
consistent.
across the industry.
So, I
And we
mean,
wanna
the-
make sure-
The questionnaire is actually pretty labor intensive. If you try to do it, it's going to take between at least 45 minutes.
At
probably-
least.
Probably more.
So which I was very impressed we had that kind of response.
Yeah, so I should have pointed that out. We had, considering how long it takes to do that, and we did do seminars on how to complete it, to let people know going in. But we didn't want to subject the teachers to do that, since we already had a very good idea of what their duties already were. So we were just trying to update the people that had changed over time.
And one of the things too, we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. You know, we may call something this title in Roanoke County, where in Montgomery County, they may call it this title.
Exactly.
So we wanted to make sure that they were comparing those exact jobs, because that's the only way to really do a true market comparison.
Right, some people have the impression it's a title match, but it's not a title match. We were comparing the duties from other districts.
So like I said, I feel very comfortable now with all this after the back and forth and the work that we put into this, that we have a really solid plan that will move forward. And hopefully, I mean, we're going to have to always keep looking at it, because as we know, everybody's changing right now too. But I feel like this will be a good step, that's for sure.
Didn't he just vote not to give him a day off, but now he's worried about pay?
Well, pay and benefits is something that's very important to me. I've made that clear since being elected. It's one of the things that, to me, we cannot recruit the best, we cannot retain the best if they can go next door and make 10, 15, 20% more money. And I know that we lost a lot of teachers last year to other districts because of that. So do you feel like with this study and what you're talking about implementing, that we're going to be more competitive?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I feel like we're going to be more competitive. I feel like we're going to be very competitive on the support side. I am, depending on what teacher scale we're able to afford, because as you're saying, what was like twice as much, if not more,
Right.
to do the teacher side too.
Well, and one thing that concerns me, I know last year we talked about this, because in the past, like the 30-year scale, and I know we have staff that have more than 30 years, and if a teacher starts right out of college, what would they be, 22 years old, something like that?
Yes.
30 years, you're at 52. Well, I'm not too far off from 52, and I hope to think that I'm being productive. So I know that people are working longer now because of health insurance and other issues. So I want to make sure that we're treating our folks that have that level of experience the same way. I'm concerned if we're going to be giving a teacher with 5 years of experience, a better raise than we're giving somebody that has 31 years of experience. I think that we got to be careful when we get to that 30-year mark that we're still giving everybody the same percent.
That's the reason we did ask them to come up with a 35-step plan. But again, it comes with a cost.
Right.
So
I know
it
money
comes
doesn't grow
down-
on trees,
right,
and that's
so
where
it
our,
truly comes
our
down to,
limits are.
can
but-
we do it? I do feel very good with, even at 30, if we can't get all 35 in right now, those teachers that are already at that 30 are going to see quite a large jump by the time the scale has, sorry, Dr. Micey, gone this way to spread
I
out.
can't make every teacher smile about giving them a day off and then turn around and say, well, you're not going to get the same raise as
Understood.
somebody over here. So, I mean, it's just not fair. For me, it's not fair. You know, I mean, I've worked in government my whole life, so I understand how all this stuff works. And we don't do that in public safety. And I don't like it just for the simple fact of some people may be raising a family at an older age now, and they need that money, and it's just not fair if they're putting in the same level of work as somebody else.
It's a good point, and we can still, I mean, this doesn't say we're locked into this, but it's, so we can.
Grow it up.
Yeah, and I
can.
agree with that. I agree with
One thing I'll point out, and you'll see this in Ms. Peterson's presentation, to get on the scale, you're gonna see, it doesn't usually go this way, but anytime you change the scale, you're gonna see us talk about average increases, because in order to get to that 1.6 step from a 1.5, that means there's gonna be an average across the board of what people are gonna get, but because of the differential for the first year, it was not gonna be the exact same percentage across the board.
Right.
So I say that up front, because
Right. Well, and I know we have the scale, the step scale, and I'm assuming that any teacher should be able to look and know from the start
Absolutely.
what dollar they're going to be making 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Of
Yes,
course,
sir.
we're going to adjust that with inflation.
That's why I
Theoretically.
like our pay plan. I feel it's very transparent now. You can truly open it up, and if you're a 10th year teacher and you have a master's degree, you go right to that, and that tells you.
That is your
exactly.
salary.
So you know in 5 years, provided nothing changes, you're gonna look at 15 and step forward, you're gonna see that that's a master's.
Right.
So, and the good thing that we can do on the support side, once people are in that, the board has been gracious enough to give a step to everybody every year. So again, they can assume that if they're on this step now, 5 years from now, here's where I'm going to be.
Now, they get the step, but then we would also look at cost of living.
Some years we
Every-
get, correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's the
definitely
important thing to
years
me.
that we have given the step, like if you give a 3% raise and our step's only 1.6, then what we'll do is we'll give a step, then a 1.4% increase over top of that.
we'll shift the whole
And to
scale.
shift the whole
So we
scale
would
on that.
shift starting pay as well, and max,
Right.
starting max, it goes through the chart. Okay.
This first year of implementation, in order to get to the new scale, it's gonna be different, but then moving forward, we'll go back to,
What we've
yes.
done in the past.
Okay. Great.
It's all kind of
Therefore, it
wrapped
is a
in the same
lot
thing this
more.
year.
Now, if you get me hemmed up with some of these teachers, I'm coming to you.
I
I'm
can
telling
assure
it's
you,
Jim
Mr. Johnson,
Bradshaw's
The
fault.
last thing that either one of us want to do is get him to with those
Call
teachers.
human resources.
He's kind of closely related to this
Yeah,
project.
Yeah, he is.
I'm very comfortable with
He's
and I
tied
do,
into
I'm
this.
very comfortable saying, I do like the teachers.
Yeah, he
are
has to
gonna
go
be
home
very
and have dinner.
Pleased.
Okay.
Especially as they move through the scale, because they're gonna see.
Well, it's important, and especially right now with inflation the way it is. I mean, it's hitting everybody. It doesn't matter where you're at.
It does.
You know,
I can't help but sharing a personal story, and I'll do it real briefly, but, when I was on my way to see Shrek Jr. the other evening at one of our schools, I ran into one of our teachers who left us this year to go to a different place, and she wants to come back.
I'm getting back.
And so because of the scale and what we're doing, we can, I said, Jim, you need to work on that, and we need to get her back. But because we plan it out, you can see, we can say, this is exactly what you would do, so we're gonna work pretty hard to get her back.
good. That's
And
good.
we're doing it with
Thank-
a lot of them.
Well, thank you both for all your work, and thank your Department of Human Resources
Absolutely.
for putting in all this time. I know that it took some
Anytime I
effort.
say aye, you all know that means
Sure.
I got an entire team, because I cannot do this. It's, yeah, so I
Now,
appreciate it.
if you can just hire me some building managers, I'll be in good shape.
I'm telling you, we are trying.
Now, that's the next goal.
Well,
Gotcha.
Mike, just to that point, Brent's point, Mike and I, when we came on the board, this is probably one of our
Main
signature.
objectives.
Yeah, we recognized, because for the prior 6 or 8 years before, teachers had raised one time or maybe a
Yeah, they
bonus,
wouldn't
a
even
$500
get-
bonus
they wouldn't
one
even get a
year.
raise.
And so we are happy that,
Yes.
we can continue to make this progress. Our teachers are our most valued possession, obviously in schools for what they do and what they provide to our community. And I mean, they are just a commodity, and I don't know if I'm saying the right words, but they are a treasure to Roanoke County. And they are just, we're fortunate that we've provided that pay raise every year.
I agree. And Mr. Hudson, if I can say one more thing, I know you.
Sure.
But I also feel like it's important for all of our teachers, whether they're first year going to second year or 10th year going to 11th or 20th, they get a pay raise. And I know a lot of scales and divisions around us, or others will compare, they give this great number at the beginning, but the teachers don't see a penny until year 6 or year 8 or year 3 or whatever the case may be. And I feel like that's something in Roanoke County that we can say that you're going to get. Again, thanks to the board, you guys have been gracious. I mean, ever since I've been back, it's been wonderful. They know they're going to get those raises. I think that means a lot to just the whole self-worth and all that kind of stuff of our employees. So
We need to stay focused.
And our support staff is very important as well. I mean, we've
Oh,
got to
yes.
feed our kids, we got to get them to school with our bus drivers, we need our counselors, we need our physical therapists that we mentioned, we need our HVAC workers. I mean, we have so many people that it takes a village to run this operation, and
Absolutely.
everybody has to feel appreciated.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you again for everything. Item 2.12, 2023-2024 Budget Work Session, number 2, Mrs. Susan Peterson.
Are we in the same work session? Is this still?
You were still the same day, same work day.
You've got 10 minutes, Ms. Peterson. I'm just kidding.
Really?
You notice how she flew up here because she's bringing her pixie dust and fairy dust to make all this work.
We hope so.
Well, we'll start off with saying we don't have answers yet. We have questions.
Are we kind of working through this booklet?
Yes.
On this sheet.
Both.
Both of them. Yeah, don't look at this until we get to the end.
All right.
Because if you start looking at this, you're not gonna listen to me.
That's right.
Well, let's get
Yeah, I've
started.
already been doing that.
All right, well, here we go. Work session number 2. I feel like we're really late in the game. So we've got a lot of stuff to go over today. I really need to- There we go. We're gonna touch base on revenue update, compensation and benefit dollars, department requests will take up the majority of time, and then take a quick look at our remaining timeline. Because we are getting down to the wire here. So first, we'll take a look at the revenue update. Before we get into the revenue update, last time I didn't actually bring the methodology for our grade level progression. And so I wanted to go over that real quick because I did sharpen my pencils since our last meeting, change a couple of things in the calculation, and I am bringing forth a recommended change in ADM. So that's kind of the reason why we're revisiting this again. For the grade level progression, this is how we've done it always. We calculate the grade level progression rate itself over a 5-year average. We multiply that rate by the current year enrollment. And what we'll do is we get the enrollment in December, and I'll calculate it, then we'll get in January, and I'll calculate it, and then we'll get it in February, and I'll calculate it again. And so each time we'll calculate to see where we're sitting. So what I've done in the past and what we've done for years and years and years is in that 5-year average, we actually included the current year in the rate itself. And so the rate was changing as we recalculated it. So I went back and I picked up a prior year so that that rate is not changing. Our survivorship rate stays the same. It's not a variable that we're multiplying against a variable, right? So I think that makes better logical sense statistically when we're performing this calculation. So that's a little bit of change. And when I did run that, the number of students went up a little bit. Not a ton, but it did go up a little bit. I think it made sense. And just to let everyone know, there has been questions. We do get live birth data from the Virginia Department of Health, and we back that or take that forward. We take the enrollment date when the student will enter kindergarten, and we'll go back to 5 years and pick up the live birth rate. And we'll come down, we'll do the trend analysis of that and multiply the average 5 years prior to the current enrollment to come up with what our kindergarten levels will be. So that's kind of the big methodology of how we do the grade level progression. So this is a very busy graph. So let me walk through how to take a look at this real quick. We've got 3 columns. We've got the December column, the January column, and the February column. We have the VDOE estimated ADM, which I shared with you at the last meeting. So that's in each column, so you can kind of see them side by side. The revised grade level progression is going to be in the middle. And then we've got the actual enrollment for that month end. So the December enrollment was 13,418, 13,421, and then it came in at 13,392 for February. And I'd like to explain that reduction. We participate in a students with intensive support needs regional program with the Virginia Department of Education. It's frequently called CISNA. And what this is it's a regional program that we assign students to go into. And when we put students in this regional special needs program, we have to take them out of ADM. This year, we actually increased the number of students that we put into that program. So we have to take them out of the ADM numbers. It benefits us because we get about $14,400 for each student in the CISNA program, where we get more like $7,600 through ADM for that student. So it is a benefit to increase that enrollment and ask for tuition in those students in that manner. And so that's why that last little bit reduced. The red line going across the top is the enrollment that we brought forth to you for approval at the last meeting. It was the 13,400. After taking into consideration the change in the grade level progression and the change in enrollment, we felt more comfortable. So if you look over here, what we brought to you before is kind of a little bit higher than where we are now, but we dropped it by 25. So our recommendation is now going to be the 13,375, and that brings us down a little bit below where we are now, and just it's a little bit more conservative. I feel better recommending that to Dr. Nicely. He concurred that we are aggressively being conservative with that adjustment. Any questions about that? There's a lot of information thrown out there.
Yeah, it's about $125,000 roughly.
And again, just not to belabor it, but that VDOE estimate, we just have no basis for trusting that. I mean, nothing against the VDOE, but it just doesn't make any sense. So that's why we kind of threw that out.
Yeah. During the last meeting, I can't remember which individual asked for this, but one of you asked for kind of a look at the demographic study that we did back in 2016. When I went back and looked at the numbers, giving you the actual number of students really was not relevant at this point because of all that we have gone through. But this slide shows kind of a line chart of the percentage change versus our ADM percentage change. So the purple line is the demographic study, and then the gold line is ours. And you can kind of see, we were kind of trending slightly off of them, at the beginning, but then when COVID hit, everything really went out the door, and we couldn't even begin to continue using their trends at this point. So I know that there has been discussions with the county staff of them doing another demographic analysis, and we will probably be wrapped up in what they do so that they're doing it to look at, development and safety and fire needs and all of that throughout the county, but I think they wanted to wrap in the student needs as well. So ours actually ended in 2026, so it really wouldn't be a bad idea to get that source of data again. I will say that when we got this and I started getting into looking at it, they have like a plus minus cushion in there of such a big amount that it could be like, we could be hundreds of thousands of dollars off based on their min-max cushion. So you kind of have to take all of these with a grain of salt and not necessarily point to it and say, that's gonna be our number.
Well, we used them the first year, if you recall.
We did.
Yeah, and we got hammered. Bad. It was
They put
like
us in the.
300 or more off, if I remember.
Yeah.
So they're paying for another demographic study on the county side?
They're putting together a request for proposal right now to go down that path.
Just tell them to use ours, it was so good. Another study.
So we reran all of the numbers for the governor's budget, the House, and the Senate using the 13,375. And the first column here is what our 2023 current budget is for state revenues. The second column is the governor's budget. It will be different from what I presented before because I have dropped the ADM. The third column is the House, and it's highlighted in yellow because the House did come in a little bit less than the governor's budget. And then the last column is the Senate version, and it came in higher. So as you know, we always grab the lowest and start our budget looks and analyses on the lower of the House and the Senate. So based on that change from prior year column, you can see it looks like we've got about 7.9 million more in the general fund revenue. That would be our operating revenue. The other funds in here are the textbook, the instructional resources fund. The grant fund is going down slightly. The nutrition fund is going up a teeny bit. And then capital projects, that 4.3 million was the allocation given last year that was a one-time allocation. So that's kind of where we stand now. When you get into the minutia to compare the House and the Senate to what the governor proposed, that's what these differences are. These differences are only governor to House and Senate. They're not to budget of prior year. The SOQ basic aid formula was adjusted for the House. They brought it down and the Senate took the money up. So you can see that differential. I will say that if you recall the last time I presented to you guys, the VDOE had a formulary error in their calculator tool. They have corrected that with the House and the Senate. And so these numbers have the sales tax corrected, and the amount is what we truly can expect for next year.
Are they gonna, has that been addressed?
I thought they were gonna.
From my understanding, we are supposed to get a superintendent's memo in the next couple of days that will provide some guidance and information on what I've heard termed as a skinny budget, which is kind of a stopgap budget because they did not adopt a final General Assembly budget.
Is there an acting state superintendent?
That has happened yesterday.
March
As of
9th.
March 9th, so I'm sure they'll name somebody.
Okay.
And they did say, the one thing that I do know that both the House and the Senate said was that they will fund every school division for that formulary error. So we won't be harmed by that at all.
For this year.
For the current year.
This year.
Which is the most imminent, because that's what
Sure.
people have already started spending.
Where we're at, yeah.
So the next box in the middle is compensation. If you recall, the governor put in a 5% raise and the Senate and House both put in a 7% increase. Dr. Nicely questioned why that would not be the same increase for both the House and the Senate, but I think that's more relatable to the fact of the SOQ basic aid changing and the support cap that's put in there and how they have changed and have different ideologies.
If you recall that issue with the support cap, where they had that arbitrary cap on what they reimburse us for, the Senate, I think, was trying to do a little more on that for us versus the House. So I think that's the difference.
Yep.
But that comes back to us to fund the 7%, right?
Well-
They're not.
Part of it,
Right. Right, because it isn't paid for, yes, for everybody.
Right.
Exactly.
and it doesn't pay for all of any one person, just the
Right.
state portion. They also had different opinions on the bonus. The House took the bonus completely out, and the Senate provided a bigger bonus line item. For ESL, or English as a second language, the Senate added some funds in there for those programs and those needs. The Senate also added more funds in there for our at-risk students. So that's just kind of a summary of what they're looking at.
Big difference.
So that's really all I had on the state money right now. So if you have any questions on that, we can go on. All right, so the next thing I want to kind of go over is student fees. Every year, the school divisions have to adopt a student fee schedule. Typically, I'm bringing it to you at the last minute, but I was able to get this looked at, and we had staff review and provide us estimates of what the fees will be for next year. Just to be clear, we are not allowed to charge a fee for a free and appropriate public education. We are only allowed to charge it for what BDOE says we can, for extracurricular activities like locker room rentals, parking spots, things like that. And we do follow the BDOE rules and guidelines specifically, and we do not charge any fees for anything that we are not supposed to. Two of the fees up there are the nutrition fees and the AP and PSAT fees. Nutrition hasn't been touched at all because we can't even begin to guess what that change is going to be. We receive a price equity tool from the BDOE, and we have to go through and put our numbers into that, and it will give us a minimum of what increase in fee we have to put forth. And that's not released yet. We don't think it's going to be released until about June. And then the AP and PSAT, we took a guess at that, but that could be changing when the College Board meets in the summertime. And just to be very clear in red, I wanted to make sure everyone understood that all of these fees that we talk about can and will be waived for any student who is economically disadvantaged or whose student's family is economically disadvantaged. That request will go through the principal, and the principal will ensure that the fees are waived for those students who need it. So this is the fee schedule. It's kind of small up on the board, so I apologize for that, but you do have a paper copy. The items in yellow are the only ones that do intend to be changing for next year. Under the secondary instruction fees, you will see that we did add back the summer school repeat course for $200, and then the summer school non-resident repeat course. I would like to be very clear that this fee will not be charged in summer of 2023. It will be charged in summer of 2024. So we're going to have to take a look at summer school because part of summer of 2023 will be in fiscal year 24, and all of summer school of 24 will be in fiscal year 2024 based on how it's going to fall. So I have not been able to cost all of that out, and I will have to bring that to you in the next meeting we have. Each of the, well, just about each, all but one of the items in the CTE field have seen changes, and so you see those in front of you, and Mr. Sir has vetted that out and made sure that for our adult education we are charging what we need to ensure the program runs smoothly. The PSAT fee changed slightly, and then the PE uniform fee did not change overall, but they changed the mix of it, the breakdown between the shorts and the shirts.
They really got detailed, didn't they? Kids must be getting bigger up top and smaller down.
I do want to point out one thing. You can see the very first item is dual enrollment fees, and it's a TBD. That's because we don't charge a dual enrollment fee. Virginia Western does, and so we pass that cost along, but we don't charge a fee.
Right. So we're going to get to the next slide that I know everyone is really anxious to see, our compensation and benefits. So let me walk you through how this slide is set up first. These are, we have 4 different teacher scale options that have been provided to us. 2 of them begin with changing the starting salary for the teacher to $45,000, and 2 of them have the teacher salary at the first level, starting at 46,000. So the 45,000s are the top, the 46,000 start level are at the bottom. The other difference is the two plans on the left have 35 steps, and the two plans on the right have 30 steps. So you can see the 35 step is going to cost more than the 30 step in all cases. And then the raises are higher. We have overall average raise calculated as opposed to individual raises because, well, I'll get to that. I've got a slide on that a little bit later. But all of these are not going to be the raise that any one person will necessarily see. This is the overall raise for that group. So we're looking at maybe 6.5 million for the 45,000 and 35 steps, 6.2 million for 45 and 30 steps. We're looking at 8.2 million for 46 and 35 steps, and then 8 million for 46 and 30 steps. These are some big numbers.
I want to say one thing out loud because I had to do this little mental exercise. I know you all get this, but it's not, when you talk about 30 versus 35, it's not that the minimum is set and the maximum is set and you either divide that by 30 or 35. That's not what it means. It's the minimum is set and then that 1.6% increase goes for each step. So you can either stop at 30 or stop at 35, which is to your point earlier, even if we only did 30 this time or whatever, you could still continue to grow that in future years if you chose to. We would just keep increasing that by the 1.6% thing. I'm just saying that out loud because I had to do that little mental exercise earlier myself. If that makes sense.
All right, so moving on to the non-teacher scale, costing this one out in the general fund, we're looking at a 7.2%, again, overall average increase. This is going to cost us $3.8 million. And in the nutrition fund, their cost will be $300,000.
Jeez. So we add these all together.
It's gonna be a lot of money.
This,
We're looking
fun
at $10 million.
question. This,
The cheapest options.
does this put our nutrition at a competitive, very competitive level?
They're already very competitive. If you recall, when MAG presented, they were under the list of they were current because of what we increased it last year when you approved the rates.
Have we had any headway in filling those positions?
Nutrition.
We have. Great.
As far as I'm aware, they're only down 20 positions.
Which is great.
Yeah, I
We
think it
were
was,
running
what, double
40
or so
short.
before that,
At
wasn't
least
it?
that,
yeah.
So maybe the increase curbed that.
Great.
I'll be honest, I don't think they've been down to only having a 20% open in like 10 years.
Great.
So I think that was even like way beyond the whole COVID. So I think we're better than we've been in a very, very long time.
Good.
And to your point, yes, Mr. Ray, by increasing that minimum wage up to 15 and something, we will be even that much more competitive.
Good.
So just to, Dr. Nicely did kind of touch base on this when MAG was presenting, but when we talk about the average raise this year, we've got to keep in mind, you know, the purpose of the study was to create a competitive teacher scale. And it was to align that teacher scale with our non-teacher scale so that we didn't keep running into this compression of raising the teacher scale and not raising the support scale is enough. And the problem when you do that is you end up, the administrators or the higher level teachers who would jump to the administrator scale have nowhere to go because our higher levels get lower compared to the teachers. And so you end up with like a compression. And so we wanted to get from the 2% and the 1.5% differentials in the steps, we really need to get that similar so that we didn't have a mischanging of the scales. that was a unfortunate side effect from the very first compensation study that we went through many years ago. And so in doing that, we're literally changing the structure of the scale. And when we change the structure of the scale, you're not going to be able to say, like we have in the past, everyone's getting a 7% raise. Because the person at one end mathematically will not have the same raise as the person at the other end, because there's an expansion all the way down. You're expanding it from 1.5% every step of the way. So that just mathematically, the raise will vary among all of the employees.
Unlike what we saw in the compensation study, these numbers do take into account all the benefits.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would not present you anything that was not fully costed out.
It's an excellent point, because that number I said that you saw earlier, don't pay attention to that, because you have to add in, yes, sir,
40%.
right.
And to Mag's credit, they have a software where they calculate all of this out, and they do it for all of the states. And all of the pension and the VRS, like, there is no VRS in Pennsylvania, right? So when they go through and do this, they can't handle calculating that pension piece for all of their clients. So we knew ahead of time that we were going to get salary only, and then we would have to take the next step. The other thing that they looked at was our stipends. They took a look at our current stipend scale and provided a recommended new one for both athletics and academics. When we ran that through the number of employees that would get each of them, it will be an increase in the general fund of $60,450 for your academic stipends, and $8,560 in your grant fund for these academic stipends. And those are basically special ed stipends that are split between both funds. Then on the athletic side, we've got just under 211,000 increase with those stipends. So now, if you don't have any questions on the compensation plan, I'll move into our insurances. All right, silence is golden. Quick update on our health insurance. Just to remind you, we do have a plan that we participate in with the county and the jails. So we're kind of in a pool with them when we go out to RFP and all of that. We are self-insured up to $250,000. We have a stop loss limit where we have bought extra insurance to cover us for our very large claims. We are at the end of the RFP negotiations right now, and so we're just kind of getting ready to sign on the dotted line to have that new plan in place. We expect absolutely no changes to the plan structure. We have no changes to the rates. And we recommend no change to the general fund budget at this time. And I wanted to share with you what our participation levels are. We do have 71% of our employees are participating in health insurance. And of that, 82% are participating in wellness and 18% are not. Our healthcare consultant provided us information on a benchmark that they have studied that they had done across 152 other school divisions. My purpose in providing this to you is to share, kind of, we've got a good plan. We don't have a lot of places where we can trim it for any cost savings. And I don't think I would want to or want to recommend doing so because we do have a good plan out there. So on the left-hand side of this screen, you've got our information for individual and family, and on the right-hand side is the benchmark for the individual and the family. The deductibles are very similar. The out-of-pocket maximum is a little bit better on Roanoke County Public Schools with the individual at $3,500 and the benchmark at $4,250, so we're a little bit better there. Similar co-insurance. The employee monthly cost for wellness is slightly better for our individuals where we're charging $64 a month. Most other benchmark schools are at $109. For family, we are not quite as good. We're at $624, where others are at $678. Our HRA contribution is not quite as good either. We've got the 1,000, and the benchmark study had 1,175 and 2,000. Not really sure why they came up with 1,175. That's kind of an odd number to be throwing out there. It just seemed odd, and it's not very different either between the individual and family. We have a bigger difference between individual and family because you have more people on the plan, right? So the employer contribution, we contribute 90% to the premium for the individual, and we contribute 60% to the family premium, where in the benchmark it's 84% and 64%. Then when we get down to the prescription drugs, our medicine tiers are a little bit better here as well. Our copays are $10, $25, and $30 for your tier 1, 2, and 3, where the benchmark it was tier 2 and 3 were a little higher. They were $35 and $60. So it's a little bit better for us. We also don't provide require a co-insurance for tier 1 and 2, where the benchmark had a copay for both of these tiers. So just background information for you. And then the next one, I know this is small on the screen, but just to prove there is nothing going on in these last two columns, which is what you want to see. We are not recommending any change to the employee, to the premiums or anything this year. So the wellness plan kind of goes hand in hand with our rate structure. Currently, we do have the clinic here at central office, and to participate in the wellness plan, you have to complete 3 steps to wellness. There has been some discussion, and what we would like to do is open this up because a lot of times employees are going to their primary care physician and having an annual exam anyway. And so we would like to open it up and allow employees, if you have that annual exam with your own doctor, that's great. We'll accept that instead of going to the healthcare. You could do either. The benefits of having the wellness plan and having it structured the way we do is that if you are on wellness, you get lower premiums. We provide an additional 10% reduction in your premium for being on the wellness. And, you know, this is really a good thing for our employees. It helps them identify any life factors that could affect them down the road. I mean, on the division side, it's protecting us from that heart attack, but that's helping the employee as well. It's letting them lead a better life. And so we really want them to, if they don't come and do the 3 steps to wellness at our clinic, then we want them to at least have all of the information looked at with their primary care physician so that they're keeping in touch with their own health. We are working with the county of Roanoke and the jails to rebid the health clinic, the vendor who manages the health clinic. We're only doing this mainly because we've run to the end of the term of our contract with Marathon. So that's on the street currently. I think you have asked about offering cash in lieu of benefits. This has been a question that various members of the school board have asked about in the past. And so I did want to share this slide that I collated from our insurance consultant to give you information on what that would look like if we offered a cash in lieu of benefits. First off, it's very difficult because there are a lot of IRS regulations, stipulations surrounding it. And so our insurance consultant indicates that it is very tricky to set up and manage and monitor. There are Medicare rules that we cannot incentivize people to come off of our insurance for getting this because of Medicare rules. There's a lot of background information that we really would make it very difficult to manage. And it would be also very costly. If you recall back on the health insurance slide, there were 642 employees that do not take our insurance. And so if we offered $1,000, that could cost us $691,000. If we upped it to, say, $2,500, that could be up to $1.73 million. So it could be very costly. Other things that we would want to consider is, you know, if we gave them the cash in lieu of benefits, that would increase their wages, it would increase their taxes. That would just have to be handled just like regular payroll taxes. It could increase our Affordable Care Act taxes that we have to pay into the government. It could increase, you know, when we pay overtime to employees. We would have to track this in addition to their regular pay rate to increase their overtime pay rate. So there's a lot of complicated issues in here. And then finally, it could also have a negative impact if we offer this and people came off of the insurance. Then you're having fewer people participate in the insurance, fewer premiums going into the plan to cover the claims costs that are on the plan. So I just wanted to provide this information for you because I know that various board members have had questions on providing a benefit such as this in the past.
Question, we're required, there's a form that we get if you have insurance for every month, and that goes to your taxes. I mean, they know whether or not you had insurance.
Correct.
So if we started paying people, that would come out of a whole different bucket.
So another complicated,
That's right,
yeah. And this is not necessarily my opinion, this is the opinion of our insurance consultant.
yeah.
So what is our surplus balance at for the
In the health insurance fund, probably around 6 or 7 million.
6 or 7? Can we?
I haven't looked at it. I've been working on budget, I'm sorry.
I understand. Can we get an update when you have a chance?
Yes. It actually,
Catastrophic is great.
it'll be in the board report. I
You'll
add
have
it
to
every
pay
year,
fast.
every month when we close our books. It's in the
Okay.
board reports. But I'll send it out to you when we get it done. And I'll be honest, when calculating the health insurance for next year, it looks like we're gonna be overspending in the general fund where we would wanna increase. But I didn't do that because I knew you would probably not wanna do that because we have the.
No, absolutely. We should help our teachers
And Ken
anywhere
didn't
we
take it
can.
off the list, so.
Yeah. Ken didn't want his rates to go up.
Sorry. Didn't mean to throw you on the bus there.
No, I think we've got the, you know, the balance in our reserves to cover us. I don't think we need to, you know, transfer anything from the general fund this year, so. Plus, you'll see we need to find some money to cover these rates.
Exactly.
Yeah, he
Just
was already
wanna,
taking
just,
the red
just wanna
pens
have
of
an
the
idea.
department
In an
request.
effort to, because I'm starting to lose it here a little bit, 3 hours in. Dental, can we vision,
Yeah, we
I mean,
can
is it?
skip all that if you.
No, I don't want to say skip, but just real quick, I mean, not.
Faster?
Give us the line by line item.
Sure. So with dental, again, we are in a consortium with the county, the jail, and the city. We are fully insured with this, so this is not one that we have to incur the cost of the claims itself. We entered a new contract with Delta Dental as of January of this year. There are no changes. Your column at the right are empty, no premium changes, no anything. So we're kind of status quo with where we are. If you want to see the participants, we have 73% of our employees are participating with the dental. And we're still competitive with our peer groups, so I'll let y'all scan that on your own and not bore you to tears going through that one. So there's dental rates. Vision is the third insurance I usually bring before you. That one, again, we participate with the county and the jail authority and the city. So actually, the city's not on that. That's a mistype, sorry. This is fully paid by the employee. We have no cost output. We just put together the rates with the vendor and offer them up. You can see how we compare, and then our rates are not changing. So good news is none of these three insurance rates will change for next year. All right, so now we'll get to the heart of why you really want to be here outside of the compensation dollars, and that's gonna be our department requests. I will say, give you kind of a heads up before we get into these lists, I've got a list for each department. They are in order. The staffing is listed first. They're listed high dollar to low dollar, and then non-staffing is listed high dollar to low dollar. So I don't have them in any priority whatsoever. The staffing cost does include the FICA, the VRS, and the VRS pension and the VRS insurances. So first, your summary of our general fund revenue. We've got the state revenue going up by 7.4 million, excluding the CISNA program. Since I changed the ADM, I wanted to share what the CISNA was gonna look like, and that really kind of directly relates to special ed. And so I wanted to kind of share how we'll be using that CISNA piece. The technology replacement fund on here is a little bit of different. I had an epiphany, but from the last meeting to now. Currently, we have $3 million worth of state money and federal money going into our technology plan. All of that, we don't get the cash until part of it, the state starts paying in January, and then some E-rate money, we don't get until almost the end of the school year. So it would be my recommendation to take all of those revenues, move them back into the general fund, and then increase our transfer to the technology fund. So then that way we can go ahead and put the cash in the technology fund on day one, because Mr. Terry tends to spend 90% of his technology budget on day two.
Get it before they use it.
So that would just kind of help cash-wise to, with the fund. And so that's why that's kind of added in here. So it's not in the 13 million because it's not to be used for other things. The transfer increased as well. It's kind of technical, I'm sorry. That was kind of a sideways thing. Right now, we have a draft of revenue from the county of 5.4 million. I'm not going over the calc tool until the revenue sharing agreement, until we actually get the next version, which I hope to be before we present again. I think that they did review revenues in a work session this week, so hopefully they can start to firm up some of those numbers. These numbers are draft, so we can expect some movement here. And then our new science supervisor, he's done an outstanding job getting donations for the science fair. And so she has already collected $1,500 more than what she budgeted. So we'll go ahead and raise her revenues for that and raise her line item for her science fair by that same amount. So again, $1,500 is kind of already spoken for. All right, getting into our departments. In administration, we have a request to increase the athletic stipends, $196,000. Yes, sir.
Can you hold that thought? So didn't we address that last year with athletic stipends? We added positions and raised pay. Do you recall that?
This is not, I'm sorry, I should have said supplement. This is not stipends, this is supplements.
Stipends on the next page.
This is the allotment that we
This is
give
what
to
they
the
get to run their
schools.
programs.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
versus
got
what
you.
paid
I'll-
coaches.
Gotcha. Thank
I
you.
have the wrong
No,
word.
good
up there.
clarification.
That's the worst that I do in here, we're good there. But yes, that would be helpful.
Stipends is the wrong word. So what-
It's allotment,
Allotment, thank you. Allotments.
so I'm
Confused me
sorry.
there for a sec. I was like, oh, wait a minute.
There's a lot going on. So that's, some of that is adding the sixth graders to the program. And then just some other just needs that, you know, fuel is going up and we have to pay to bus some of the students to games. And there's additional costs for your Cave Spring and your high school kids to get bused to Bogle that your other schools don't have. And so there are costs that are rising for athletics. There is discussion on copier costs and copy paper costs. Typically, our schools pay for those items out of their administrative allotment. And so I know Dr. Stegall has been in her downtime, because she probably has as much as me. She's been reaching out to the schools and collating kind of what that looks like as an increase in the budget. So here's a big, enormous list. This is human resources. So the first line is the teacher scale, and as you see, I've got the 6.2 million to the 8.2 million listed on here for implementing the teacher scale. I will let you know that the total at the bottom is based off of the 6.2 million. So if we went up to 8.2 million, you add more to that total. The 3.8 million I've kind of gone over already. So really I've kind of gone over the first several items. We'll get to the first negative item. The employee extended work plan, the 110. That's just a change in the employees, the retirees that are on the program for next year. We had a jump in FY23, and that's going to come down with a change in the makeup of the employees that are on the EWIP program next year. I went ahead and threw on a 750 lapse. I haven't talked to Mr. Bradshaw about that yet, but that's what we threw on here last year, and I was actually not being conservatively aggressive. I was just being aggressive to try and help matters. But that is the amount that we used last year. So year to year, it's not a change. We have a PTO leave plan changes on here to be determined. Mr. Bradshaw has a plan that he is working on bringing before the board, and we just need to cost that out and ensure that we understand the implications that would have. There is a request to convert instructional assistants to a longer number of days contract. So that's going to be just over $500,000. And then there was also a request, so, last year we moved the nutrition associates into paying full-time rates for their health insurance. So that left very few people paying part-time rates. And so there is a request on the table, if the board so chooses, to just do away with the part-time rates and let everybody have the full-time rates. That's just something to bring to your attention, and you can let us know if that is something you're interested in moving forward with. So the next department, we've got school counseling. So these are two social and emotional learning programs that they started with some grant money a couple years ago, and we have helped them pay for this through different grant funding vehicles. I think the first year may have been under a STOP grant from the federal government, and the last year we helped pay for these items under the ESSER grants. But the grants are kind of running out, and
So these are new.
These are continuing programs.
Yeah,
We've
but
just,
new money.
yeah, we need
For
to,
us.
we need to build it into the budget, yeah.
We're not asking for much.
Nope.
I'm gonna look at it like, that's a light request.
Well, some of them are small, and some of them are long. So,
Go back a few pages.
special ed and
Well,
pupil.
yeah, I know that. I was thinking of Sean here and like, well, she's not asking
Yeah.
for a lot.
Special ed and pupil personnel services, they have a lot of new staff requests. 6 instructional assistants, 2 psychologists, a BCBA for preschool that is already being written into a grant, so that'll be funded already. We have a lead nurse that is currently under one of the ESSER grants, so her funding will go away at the end of this school year, so that's on the request list. 2 behavior coaches, a special education teacher for the ASTEP program. I know y'all were speaking about that earlier when Dr. Stegall was talking with you about ASTEP. So there is a request on here to find a teacher for special education in that program. We have a need for a early childhood teacher for preschool at Bonsack. Same thing at Glen Cove, but Glen Cove's already funded by one of the grants in special ed. And then the last item on here is $50,000 for expanded MANT training. This is something where, was it 1 or 2 years ago? The VDOE put down this new requirement where, like, all administrators have to take this MANT training. Even I have to take this MANT training. And, like, I don't even see students. I sit behind a computer and crunch numbers all the time. But the special ed department, since they use the MANT with their program, they're the ones who by default have become the trainers to all of these non-special ed positions, all of your principals and assistant principals and everyone who has to take it. Well, their costs have just skyrocketed. And the problem that we have is they're paying for this out of special ed funding, and it is not a special ed need. This is teaching regular ed folks, teaching administrators a training program, a professional development. And so we really need to drop some money into the special ed and pupil personnel services department so that it's not tied to special ed and they can provide this training.
So our staff are providing that training?
Yes.
To our staff? Okay.
Yep. That was a very long explanation, sorry. So in elementary instruction, we have requests for an assistant principal to be shared between 2 schools. So this is a position that's not already on the books.
I will say I support that because both of those schools are sitting in my district. And I see how they struggle at times, especially during testing, so.
I see you didn't tell us which schools.
Well, what we do is we currently cover, like during Fort Lewis, for example, we currently cover that with
Part-time.
part-time retirees, so it's not adding staff, it's just covered in a different way.
Oh, it's definitely important. I know we got involved with it. And when they're absent, oh,
Same way you mentioned, we're covering Cundiff.
Very similar, yeah, you're talking like Burlington, Cundiff, who, prior to us in these schools, for lots of reasons, they of course have full-time APs, but we also have retirees there at least 1 or 2 days a week, just add an extra support too, especially on days like child study days and so forth, where administrators have to be tied up in IEP meetings and child study meetings and so forth. It's a big help. Yeah, I know they appreciated that.
I wonder what the difference in that number is versus the part-time, because I mean, I know we're paying a decent amount for our part-time people. So it probably wouldn't be a full 86,000 unless you incorporated what we're currently paying the part-time folks.
Yeah, I think that's something we can look at to see, can we continue using the current model because
I would imagine it's I don't know what we're paying. I know it's over 100, right, a day.
I don't know what the rate is, but.
Great, that's what I was thinking, because I know we pay a normal teacher, so administrator, so $350 a day. It's a great gig for a retiree.
We'll price it out to see what the difference is, but yeah.
They also have a request for art allotment and interpreting. Small dollars. Under and just a note, I do have TBD about the summer school in elementary and secondary, because that's one that like I said, I've got to go through and do the full costing of 2 years of summer school to see what's going to be in the grant, what's not going to be in the grant, what's going to be in July for next year, what's going to be in next year for next year. That's going to be a fun puzzle. So then the other things in secondary instruction include instrument repairs, health and PE first aid kits, and some science fair materials. That relates to that last item, the donation that we increased on the revenue page. Assessment and research requests. It sounds odd to just look at this and see we have gifted specialists underneath this, but this program is actually underneath that director, and so that's why we have the gifted specialist on this list. And we just need one extra one for the elementaries to get them back to where they should have been. Moving on into the CTE requests. The first item is a work-based learning coordinator. We are currently paying a retiree to be in this position, but I think there is hopes to open this up for a full-time employee.
That's the person who literally does all the placements for internships, apprenticeships, and manages all that. So it's currently we're kind of doing that part-time, but it probably does need to be a full-time position.
Well, when we had 3, now we got 20-some, so it's a lot different.
Oh, it continues to expand,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah.
And I won't read through this full list, but suffice it to say, each of the programs under CTE is facing inflationary issues and requesting additional funds. Moving under facilities, so I've gotten facilities in 3 different pages on the PowerPoint. We've got facilities first, we've got we're already expecting to see an overspending in the current year in our electric and gas utilities and in natural gas utilities because the prices just have skyrocketed.
Thank you, Joe.
Enormously high. So these are real needs that we're going to have to face and get some money put into this fund so that we don't face, lights cutting off on our students. That will probably be not good. And then we have an contractual increase for SSC. Under maintenance, they have a larger list here. They have the need for a couple of employees, a plumber, a general maintenance employee to help with some ground work. The rest of it are just within their division. So HVAC, the cost of, just the fluids that they get that they put in the compressors, like 4 times what they used to be. And so they are seeing huge inflationary issues as well. So that's why we just have so many items. Building and material costs are going up. The LED lights are not even in their budget. We have paid for that through CMP. And so to free up the CMP to focus on really the larger maintenance issues that one time come up, they are hoping to put some operating money set aside for LED light replacements. Their fixed contract costs are going up. They have a big need for fixed our fire extinguisher expenses and fire code compliance needs. So that can be costly and add up as we have the fire marshal come through and identify things that need to be fixed. The boiler and chiller rental, we need to increase the line item for this because we have such a lag in the supply chain, and just being able to get the part to fix an HVAC, we really oftentimes will have to rent something to get it in place so that our students and our teachers are comfortable to begin with. Gosh, we should set this up in 4 minutes. They also have a need for some other equipment and some safety equipment. So that is a big need.
You get that though.
So moving on to transportation, we've got requests for a non-CDL driver position. So this would be a person that they would hire that could drive a non-bus, right? They could drive a student in the car if they needed to.
For example, we have to provide transportation to some of these alternative placements, like your Minix of the world and that kind of stuff. We don't need to have a CDL driver to drive a car. So if we could hire somebody who's doesn't necessarily have a CDL, then we can take care of that a little easier. That's what that is.
A request to convert lot attendants to a 12-month contract from a 10-month contract. This will allow them to help do some stuff in the summertime that isn't on timesheet, because I think currently they pay a lot of them on timesheet to do wash buses and do other things in the summertime to help get ready for the next school year.
I did that. Wash buses.
And then convert their administrative assistant
Senior year.
to an administrative analyst. They've got 2 of them they have a request for. The big ticket item in their department is the diesel lock rate. This is where we work with James River. We have 4 price points throughout the year that we lock in. And this is not necessarily a hedging deal for us. It's more, we know for a fact we're going to spend $400,000 more next year because we know exactly the price that they're going to put on every invoice going forward. So we do have a real need, and diesel rates have gone up. The gas rate, the next line is $155,000 for just regular gas is going up as well. So both of those are real needs that we need to look at.
And we don't hedge because it fluctuates, so you don't know.
So what ends up happening with that price lock is one year we probably went out and the next year the vendor went out. And the next year we went out. So it's just a budgetary, so we know what to budget for the next year. A planning tool. So the summer school transportation, we did get the information from Ms. King down in the transportation department. If you recall, we are transporting students. We started with the Easter grants, transporting students during summer school. And this $53,000 would be if we wanted as a division to continue to transport them in summer of '24. Summer of '23, they're already going to be covered and paid for under the grant, but this would be if we wanted to do it in summer of '24 and build it into the budget that they would get the transportation every year. Kind of opens up the opportunity for students to get there who may not necessarily have transportation.
And we used to not do that. You understand that. That's been a recent development.
And then the last 4 items on the list, you can read just inflationary costs and different items that they currently purchase. So then the final list is going to be mine. I am asking for a finance analyst to help take some of the burden off of my staff, so that takes some burden off of me, so that I don't, use words like stipend instead of allotment in PowerPoints. The nutrition department is looking at creating kind of a career path for their nutrition associates. And what they're wanting to do is convert 25 associate positions to a nutrition lead position. And what this would be a position who has a little more responsibility that would kind of be the right hand to the manager in each of the cafeterias that we have. And the hope would be that we are preparing kind of a group of employees, one per school, that would then, as we have retirements from the manager position, they would be well trained to take over in the managerial position to apply for. And so we're trying to just build up our career path and our nutrition program. So I think that was a great idea that Ms. Huffman brought forward with her team. So the technology replacement plan transfer is what I presented before. The offset revenue is what I discussed earlier. So that would be an increase in the transfer, but we're moving all the revenue over to cover that. The fleet is what I showed you before. The joint capital funding policy is the same as I showed you before. The additional CMP transfer, same. Additional textbook fund, same. I was able to see $125,000 savings in flood insurance. And I questioned the vendor on this like 3 times, like, are you sure? Because this has been significantly increasing, and they actually did reduce the rates. They changed how they calculated it. And so we saw savings in the current year, and it kind of reset us. And so we have some savings there.
What were we paying, $175?
I don't remember off the top.
I think that's what it was.
It was a lot.
Don't say it
And it
too
was a
loud.
25% increase every year.
Don't say it too loud. They won't want us to build a new BCAT.
Our new land is out of the floodplain.
I didn't say reduction, I went up. Like that.
I tell you what,
I learned from
I think
Dr.
I'm
Nice.
getting punchy over here.
So I think Dr. Nicely may have spoken, and I'm sure you're well aware that we only have one meeting left. And we're not ready to adopt a budget. So we need some guidance from, I guess, the school board as to, I guess the options we were looking at is either have an extra work session the week before and adopt on the 16th, or have a work session on the 16th and then have an extra meeting the next week. So that would be,
Can we refer to this to kind of frame where we need to be, or are we still gonna do this?
oh, well, I guess I didn't have the total on here, but yes.
So on your other sheet that Ms. Peterson gave you, you can kind of see where we land currently as far as where we need to, what we need to come up with in order to do all of this. Obviously, right now, we can't do all of this. But I think that there's some reason not to despair. First of all, I think, there's a lot we're gonna be able to do, which is good. The other thing to keep in mind is, this is the first pass of the budget, even though we have to adopt one by March 31st. The General Assembly hasn't finished their work, and we have no reason to think any of this is going to go down. In fact, we have good reason to think that this could go up by somewhere between 1 and 4 million, hopefully. So, depending upon which version of the budget they finally adopt. So, I mean, there's hope to.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think right now it is. So, I mean, to adopt a budget, I mean, obviously, we're gonna have to pare these requests down by, you can see, about 2.8 million. So, I mean, some of that's gonna be painful, because there's some things we really need to do and would like to do. But hoping that when the General Assembly finishes doing their work, we can, restore quite a bit of that. So, I mean, I think there's a reason to be somewhat optimistic
So
here.
you're saying we put in a budget and then adjust it afterwards?
Yes, sir, kind of like we had to do last year.
Yeah,
but they didn't do
same
it.
thing.
God, yeah. But you can see on this where we're about the gap, it's about 2.8 million that we need to trim in order to do that compensation study piece, right? That's a piece of it. At that $6.2 million level, as well as the 3.8 for the support, which would be my recommendation, that we try to preserve that and cut elsewhere, and then restore back where we can, with the adopted budget and revised numbers. But anyway, so in order to accomplish that, we didn't feel like that you'd be comfortable, adopting something on the 16th, and so that's why she's in red there. Either try to adopt on the 16th, but build in an extra work session maybe next week to get there, or do some more work on the 16th and schedule another meeting that following week to actually formally adopt the budget. That's up to y'all's pleasure and schedules and all that.
I would prefer the latter.
I know Ms. Peterson would, just to give more time to crunch numbers.
Just because that's what Ms. Peterson wants.
Right. Did you go over there doing hand signs? Pick this.
I was gonna actually ask your opinion, but now that you put that out there.
I'm gonna always want more time.
Sure. Well, and there's no need to speculate,
Yeah,
so. Are you good with that?
Yeah.
okay.
All right.
Oh, right.
That's how we'll handle
It's gonna
it.
make somebody.
So we'll plan on having a work session on the 16th.
Well, it's still a regular meeting, but we'll add the work session.
Right, after the regular meeting.
And then try to, so we'll need to schedule an additional regular meeting to adopt a budget the week of the 20th. So if y'all look at your calendars and decide which of those days is best for you. Preferably not the 24th.
Righty.
Well, it's just the start of spring break, and so people might want to have plans that evening at least. Right.
23rd, if it's 3:30, works for me. 22nd.
23rd would work for me.
What's that?
I gotta go to UVA one of these days, but I know it's not the 23rd, so I'm good to 23rd.
23rd at 3:30?
That should be fun.
Yeah,
Makes me happy.
JC meeting at 8 o'clock.
I wanted to hear more about the superintendent's memo on skinny budget. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to lose weight.
That's right. That's the state superintendent, by the way.
Yeah, so I guess really just to summarize kind of what's next, because there's still a lot on the plate. We are expecting, reach out to VDOE, they're expecting to send out a superintendent's memo in the next couple of days that will kind of, I don't think it's gonna give us a new calc tool at this point, because I think they adopted a skinny budget, whatever that means. But I think they have like a stopgap measure in place for right now, so we'll get the memo to see what that says. We do expect a change in the Roanoke County revenue estimate, so that should be coming down the pike. Final compensation study recommendations, like if there's any discussion on that, picking which one we want to go with, prioritizing the department revenues, costing out PTO, leave options, costing out summer school, pulling all of that together, balancing it, getting it approved by you, taking it to the board of supervisors. It's all doable. and
All right. Is that
Pretty
all?
quickly, easy peasy.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here, all the people that had to present, and to our clerks. Meeting adjourned.